Chapter 659. Shaking off the purple flames, number 17 took a step forward, raised his right leg, and lashed out at Lu Cheng's head. It was fast and ferocious, like the assault of fire. Lu Cheng lowered his body and stepped out diagonally. While avoiding the kick, he took advantage of the fact that number 17 was standing on one leg with his right hand hanging down. With a hook and shake, he threw out a cluster of light purple flames that slithered close to the ground. It burned silently with hidden power. Even a master of fire control would be burned and melted by it. This was the manifestation of ice burning, the essence of the fifth move of the fire sect, burning mountain, evaporating lake. Number 17 missed with his kick. Exerting strength from his waist, he leaped into the air, causing the cluster of light purple flames to rush to the side of the wall. As it soared, it softened and warped the upright silver-white metal. Bending his back in midair, number 17 released himself like a tightened spring. He straightened his body abruptly and lightly kicked out with his left leg. The kick seemed casual and natural, but it was just right. It was so heavy that Lu Cheng couldn't help but sway forward to receive it. Creak. Lu Cheng circulated his qi and blood, stimulating his body. Using the simplified fighting formula, he expanded his muscles and resisted the suction force with his explosive strength. He threw a punch. Bam! His fist landed squarely on the sole of number 17's foot, causing the black military boots to flutter like butterflies. They either fell into the flames or drifted to the ground. Number 17 used the force to bounce back. Before he could regain his footing, he saw Lu Cheng pouncing at him at lightning speed. His right fist was unusually heavy and covered in purple flames. It was like the majestic hand of a legendary emperor that could encompass heaven and earth. Simplified attainment formula. His heart stirred slightly. Number 17's eyes glowed green. The light quickly gathered and shot at Lu Cheng's head. Laser beam cannon. You're fast, but I'm faster. This was a high-tech device that only number 16, number 17, and number 18 could use. It was inseparable from their own unique abilities. Even if the other codenames obtained it, they wouldn't be able to activate it. Even these three terror-grade mighty ones couldn't use it consecutively. Their bodies and equipment couldn't take it if they used it too often. Lu Cheng threw a punch, but he suddenly sensed danger. He collapsed his shoulder, pulled his arm, and forcefully changed the direction of his punch to a downward smash, causing his body to fall forward. Whoosh! The two beams of green light hit the opposite silver-white wall and directly penetrated it, leaving a hole. Before Lu Cheng could straighten his body, number 17 rushed forward, swinging his right arm and punching downwards with his clenched fist. With two bangs, he continuously hammered down with both hands. The golden-red flames bared their fangs and brandished their claws, choosing their targets to devour. Lu Cheng lowered his head and swung his arms upwards to block. Rumble! Rumble! After two punches, number 17 lowered his right arm and raised his fist from the ground towards Lu Cheng's chin. It was as if he was going to send Lu Cheng flying into the air. Lu Cheng quickly shrunk his shoulders and folded his arms in front of his body to cover his face. He was in a boxing defensive stance. Bang! A ball of fire burst out. Lu Cheng leaned back and took a step back. Number 17 took a step forward. As soon as his left foot stepped on the ground without a shoe and sock, flames immediately shot out from under his body. The flames shot up into the air, as if they were burning a cannon. Bang! At the critical moment, Lu Cheng ignited part of the flame force in his body. He changed directions in midair and moved horizontally. The pillar of fire that seemed to be shouting at the heavens brushed past him, and only burned his right leg. His navy blue trousers turned into ash. The woolen pants that Yen Zhika had mentioned vanished, leaving only red skin. If the flames had burned a little longer, even Lu Cheng would have been burned. Number 17, who had completed his combo, didn't waste the advantage he had just accumulated. He ignited the flame force in several parts of his body. This igniting was like a flickering match thrown into a car's fuel tank. Number 17 instantly exploded, throwing a total of 8 punches at Lu Cheng. This was in the time it took a normal physical invulnerability expert to throw 2 punches. Bang! 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 Lu Cheng couldn't hold on by himself. He could only assume a complete defensive stance, protecting the vital parts of his upper body. The rest of his body formed ice walls and continued to condense. Crack, crack, crack. It was hard to tell whether it was the sound of crystals shattering or bones cracking. He finally survived number 17's most violent round of attacks. Many of his body's surface were charred and sunken. After 8 punches, number 17 took a step back, caught his breath, and punched out his right fist again. The golden red flames sang joyfully, as if they had transformed into an undying bird that only existed in myths and legends. It ferociously pecked at its opponent, and its beak was number 17's fist. At this moment, Lu Cheng, who had been in a complete defensive stance but hadn't forgotten to prepare a counterattack, endured the pain. Taking advantage of his opponent's retreat, he exhaled and shouted, "Formation!" He didn't make any hand seals. Instead, he used his visualization, voice, and mind to perform a half-simplified version to save time. The air instantly froze as if it had turned into an invisible wall. The golden red immortal bird transformed from number 17's fist was about to fly out, but it was imprisoned in place. It bit and burned furiously, trying its best to destroy the wall. The half-simplified version of the formation formula wasn't as effective as the complete version. It lasted only half a breath before it was smashed and burned by Lu Cheng's fist. However, Lu Cheng had already bent his back, dodging the remaining force of the immortal bird fist. At the same time, the deep, dark universe and dazzling stars appeared around him. This move was both a counterattack and a counterattack. It was brilliant. Following which, he crossed his hands and swung them at number 17 from below like a sledgehammer. He straightened his body and stared at number 17 with his eyes fixed. Number 17 clenched his left fist and hammered it down. The moment he came into contact with Lu Cheng's hands, his body seemed to have become weightless. He took advantage of the momentum and fell back, half blocking and half parrying. He had just taken a step back when the dreamy, boundless starry sky enveloped him, turning the surroundings dark and cold with layers of ice. Number 17 was sealed in the transparent coffin, and couldn't move for a moment. The stars whizzed over like rocket launchers, smashing into the ice layer one after another. They first blasted open the crystal, and then flew toward number 17 one after another. Boom, boom, boom. The densely packed explosions almost merged into one, and the resulting shockwaves shattered more than half of the ice wall around Lin Quebec. Number 17's figure appeared amidst the scattered flames and smoke. He had a mixture of red and white liquid at the corner of his mouth. His clothes were tattered and riddled with holes. His flesh was charred black. With the defense of his shield and his control of flames, his injuries weren't too serious. However, in his eyes, Lu Cheng's surroundings were already swirling with faint purple, light blue, and scarlet. Furthermore, they were still condensing into gold and white. Bam! Lu Cheng took a step forward and struck out with his palm. Number 17 was about to block with his fist, dodge the condensation, and counterattack. However, just as he raised his arm, a green light flashed in his eyes as though he had sensed something. He forcibly used Flame Leap and moved horizontally with a bang. The change in direction was too steep, causing many of the wounds on number 17's body to split open and bleed. It's a pity he didn't take the bait and block the lament of the Ice Queen head-on. Lu Cheng changed his mind and continued attacking his enemy. At this moment, number 18 let out a scream of fear. Then Lu Cheng's eyes were filled with the radiance of the sword. Whoosh, 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 whoosh. As the sword flashed, the sound of flesh being cut rang out continuously. Ji Jianzhong and Dou Ning had worked together for a long time before finally killing number 18. If it weren't for their tacit cooperation, number 18 would have had a chance to escape from the base if it were 2 other physical invulnerability experts, as long as they weren't at the level of Warrior Sage or Dragon King. When the sound entered his ears, number 17 frowned. He made a prompt decision and shot out a violent and terrifying reddish-gold fireball. His target wasn't Lu Cheng but Lin Ke. As soon as the fireball flew, he ran for the door without looking back. His figure flashed continuously as he retreated. Lu Cheng's pupils shrank. He didn't dare to risk Lin Ke, whose ice wall was severely damaged. He immediately changed directions and blocked in front of the metal bed with his ice spirit holy light. Poof! Boom! The reddish-gold fireball was first pierced and then exploded. The sound was deafening, and the shockwave was like a tsunami. However, Lu Qing blocked it all. Bam, bam, bam. At this moment, number 17's figure had long disappeared from the door. No one knew where he went. Seeing Lu Cheng's slightly regretful expression, Ji Jianzhong sheathed his sword and said, "Well done. This old man was a little impulsive just now. I should have moved K, or first. Let's call it a day. The direct attacker and the leader of the base have already been killed. He's just a subject. Don't worry too much. Don't go too far. After all, Ku is still in America." So in the world of physical invulnerability experts, this isn't considered going too far. Lu Qing glanced at the dead subjects and number 18. The corner of his mouth twitched. But then again it made sense. The Americans and Japanese were in the wrong. And what they did was against human nature. What they did was the kind that would be condemned in speech and in writing. Giving them some face wasn't considered too harsh. If anyone dared to make things difficult for Ku, did they really think that their family could withstand the revenge of a physical invulnerability expert who had been waiting for them for 10 years? The borders were so long that it was easy to find a place to sneak in. Even if there was a physical invulnerability expert at home, they couldn't keep their entire family tied to their waist at all times. Once they shed all pretense of cordiality, both sides would suffer huge losses. Therefore, physical invulnerability experts knew their limits. Of course, lunatics like Dark Knight Bat were an exception. Find some survivors and copy the information here. Then destroy the base. First, we'll have something on them. Second, we'll be able to prevent K, or from being harmed by the experiments. When the time comes, we'll be able to follow the clues. Dou Ning said to Lu Qing, half sighing and half benevolent. She was imparting her experience in dealing with similar situations. Okay. Lu Qing heaved a sigh of relief and turned to another laboratory. Boom. Huge flames rose up, and the Hoko Machinery Corporation completely collapsed. Number 17, whose blonde hair was parted in the middle, was hiding in the crowd and watching the scene in a daze. Suddenly he burst into laughter. He laughed so hard that tears rolled down his cheeks. Free, free. He kept muttering. In exchange, the surrounding people looked at him as though he was crazy. P.S. Previously there were two 74s, so this is 70 SIXS. Please recommend and vote. Chapter 660. The plane flew above the clouds, sometimes stable, sometimes bumpy, as it headed towards the Southern Expressway of China. Lin K was fixed on a flatbed with an auxiliary life support system plugged in. He fell into a deep sleep due to extreme fatigue after a long period of tension, and wasn't affected by his surroundings at all. Lu Qing, Ji Jianzhong, Dou Ning, and a few other military personnel sat nearby, flipping through thick documents marked as secret. These were printed from the information they brought out from North Harbor Base. According to the description, the underground laboratory had existed for a long time, and was a product of history. It started as an air raid shelter, and was later expanded to its current state. 2 years ago, it was remodeled and welcomed a joint research team from America and Japan. This was a branch of the Artificial Weapons Project. The main focus was changed from technological devices to genetic induction. In this aspect, Japan had done a lot of preliminary research and accumulated plenty of experience. It had been many years since the United States of America started the Artificial Weapons Project. After many failed attempts, they gradually found a direction and got on the right track. They had number 1, that could be used in actual combat. After that they improved it to number 15. Even though each number corresponded to only one experimental subject, there were actually many failed products buried behind them. Even those that succeeded had problems due to various reasons. More than half of them were removed from the sequence, providing experience and lessons for subsequent improvements. So far, the experimental subjects that were still in service were only number 4, number 5, number 6, number 8, number 10, number 14, and number 15. After Lu Qing and the others wiped out them, only number 14 and number 15 in the American headquarters were spared. Among them, number 15 was a mature product in all aspects. This could allow the dangerous level experts in the United States to have a second life. As long as they did not die on the spot, they could undergo the modification, with a relatively high success rate. The only problem was that they would become rigid and mechanical, forgetting most of their memories. They would only retain their instincts and simulate normal behavior patterns according to the implanted chip. During this process, for various reasons, every test subject had a built-in blocking program to prevent them from going out of control. The blonde number 5 triggered this and suffered a genetic breakdown. After accumulating enough danger-grade experiments, the scientists of the Artificial Weapons Project set their sights on the terror grade. Number 16, who was rumored to be dead due to severe brain injuries and was in a vegetative state, entered their sights. A year later, number 16 came back to life. Even without the implantation of a chip, he could fight on his own. It was almost the same as when he was alive. However, his daily actions were a mess, and he still had to rely on simulations. With such a successful experience, the Artificial Weapon Project had a higher goal. It was to create products that were no different from normal physical invulnerability experts and could think independently. Of course, brainwashing and control were necessary. For this reason, they reduced the application of nanotechnology and instead cooperated with the Japanese. Starting from genetic induction, the North Harbor base was put into use under this background. In less than a year, number 17, who was already adept at controlling fire, was born under the guidance and cloning of the genes of many fire element terror-level experts. There were no problems with his thinking and actions, except that he appeared to be more reclusive and introverted. Combined with the high-tech equipment in his body, his special physical invulnerability level combat strength was even more surprising. He also showed some potential for growth. The experimenters called him a master of fire control, who could catch up to the Dragon King. Before number 17, most of the test subjects were on the verge of death. The few healthy captives all failed without exception. Number 17's success gave the Japanese physical invulnerability expert in charge of the base hope to improve herself. After ample preparation, she accepted a limited modification and was a great success. However, her personality was twisted, and she started to like calling herself number 18. It was because of this background that she had to apologize and make up for it in a leader's tone at that critical juncture. Recently, the North Harbor base's experiment seemed to have made a breakthrough. Before this, the standard of the test subjects depended on their original level. Modification could at most increase their combat strength slightly, and that was under the condition that there were many flaws. This time, the researchers found a better way to use the genes of the strong to make the weak undergo a qualitative change. Therefore, they urgently needed live subjects to verify it. Across the world, there were indeed many inhuman experts. However, they were not cabbages. How could there be a test subject on the verge of death, or willing to appear in such a hurry? Therefore Lin K, an inhuman with no background adventuring in the war-torn zones, was targeted. The person in charge of this was number 16. He was assigned number 4, number 5, and number 6. The follow-up verification of the information would be done by number 17, who was more independent and often active in the war-torn zones. It's a pity that the battle destroyed the main laboratory. A lot of data was lost. Also, judging from K'er's situation, their breakthrough can't be considered a success, said Ji Jianzhong with a sigh after flipping through the data. Lin K's experiment hadn't reached the most dangerous stage yet. This data is enough. It will be of great help to our related research. The military personnel agreed with Ji Jianzhong's words, but didn't dare to say it out loud. He flipped through the files and changed the topic. The core researchers of the base and number 18 are all dead. The main laboratory was also destroyed. I'm afraid no one knows how number 17 used the external control of the blocking program. What a pity. Otherwise, the military would have another physical invulnerability expert. Lu Cheng was startled for a moment and then said thoughtfully, he pondered and said, Number 17 participated in the battle for 2 reasons. First, number 18 was there. Second, he was afraid that the researchers weren't all dead, and that the damage to the main laboratory wasn't severe enough. At least before confirming that number 18 couldn't escape, He didn't dare to slack off or join in the siege. If he did, he might be dragged down with them. It would be easy for number 18 to kill him. Maybe. Dongning nodded approvingly. If number 17 was as described in the data and had the ability to think like a normal human. At this moment, the plane jolted. Lu Qing swallowed the words he wanted to say. He looked out of the window and saw the ground peeking through the thin clouds. He looked at the dilapidated miniature city, and suddenly recalled what he had seen and heard in the war-torn zones over the past 2 days. He couldn't help but open his mouth and say, "When will peace be restored here?" The overall environment was filled with despair in the war-torn zones. It seemed impossible to change it. Lu Qing was also affected by such an atmosphere. He felt that doing anything would be useless. That was why he chose to be a bystander and not interfere in matters that were within the local rules. Ji Jianzhong turned to look out of the window. He smiled, half self-deprecatingly and half emotionally. None of the forces here are righteous. The military personnel beside him felt awkward. They looked at the data and admired the scenery. Even a forbidden mighty one can't change such a situation, said Ji Jianzhong. We can only hope that after such a long period of war, people's minds have calmed down. Even the forces and mighty ones who have set up a separatist regime are willing to compromise. Look at Zhelangang. With our help, it's focused on infrastructure and order. It has attracted a lot of refugees and is developing very quickly. If this continues, it will become a benchmark in the war-torn areas and attract other forces to imitate it. When the time comes, after a certain amount of reshuffling, there might be many similar peace points. Step by step, things will get better, a military personnel emphasized. At this moment, Lu Cheng, Ji Jianzhong, and Dongning felt Lin Kei's body move. They looked at him and saw his eyelids trembling slightly before he slowly opened them. How are you feeling? Dongning leaned over and asked concernedly. Grandma, Grandpa. Lin Kei greeted them twice. His personal style was obvious. Not bad. Ji Jianzhong stood up and stood in front of the bed, consoling his grandson. You've made great progress in refining your root pulp and gained some strange abilities. After you go back and rest for a while, you'll be able to reach the peak of the inhuman stage. At that time, you can fight in the title matches and seek inspiration. Maybe you can make the great leap earlier than expected. If you really can't do it, you can come back here and train in real battles. Ji Jianzhong stood up in front of the bed and consoled his grandson. Lin Kei didn't look away. His pupils darkened a little. He said with restraint but determination, I want to come every year, even after reaching physical invulnerability. Why do you want to train in actual combat when you're already at physical invulnerability? At first, Lu Qing was stunned. Then he understood his brother-in-law's true intentions. He replied tacitly, there are other mighty ones following that human trafficking organization. Don't worry. Lin Kei closed his eyes for a moment, then opened them again and said calmly, I'll still come. He'll still come? He'll still come after suffering so much. He'll help those he can help. He'll help those who can see the suffering. A few lines suddenly appeared in Lu Cheng's mind. Face as cold as ice, heart as bodhisattva. He'll do what he knows is impossible. Maybe this is the complete version of his brother-in-law. A stubborn boy, influenced by him, Lu Qing shook off the feeling of helplessness. He smiled and said, when I accept military missions in the future, I'll try my best to choose this place. If I meet them, I'll do what I can. The plane soared through the clouds. The curve of the southern part of China was getting closer and closer. Chapter 661. When the plane landed at the military base on the outskirts of Huaxing, it was close to noon. The sun hung high in the sky. Lu Qing stepped out of the cabin door and was blinded by the bright sunlight. He felt like there was gold everywhere. He had lunch with the Ji couple and watched them leave with Lin Quebec. Then he took the jeep from the base to a nearby intersection. He saw his assistant Amen, driver Zhao Zhenhua, and silver gray MPV waiting there. Although only 2 days had passed, when Lu Qing sat in his usual seat, leaning against the soft and comfortable leather backrest and looking at the small bar with luxurious decorations, it felt like a lifetime had passed. This is how life should be. He closed his eyes and sighed. Amin saw that he didn't want to talk, so she sat diagonally across from him. She put her phone on silent mode and communicated with him via text. The car left the overpass and entered the bustling commercial district. Lu Cheng suddenly opened his eyes and turned to look at the street outside the dark glass. Half an hour had passed, but there were still deliverymen in different uniforms on the road, carrying lunch boxes. They looked busy and orderly under the scorching sun. A new shop had opened on the side of the road. There was a long line at the entrance, attracting many onlookers. Business seemed to be booming. This is what life should be like. Such things happen in war-torn zones as well, but they're all for the relief ration, not for the delicacies or additional desires. Recalling what he had seen and heard yesterday, Lu Cheng suddenly felt a surge of emotions. Amin followed his line of sight and looked in that direction. She said dutifully, "The shop. They spent money to hire a lot of people to line up. Their model is very successful. They've opened quite a number of shops. Hired extras?" Lu Cheng swallowed back the sentiments he was feeling. How am I supposed to express my emotions? Amin retracted her gaze and saw that her boss looked a little weird. She quickly added, "I heard it from a friend who specializes in this business." After hearing that, Lu Cheng suddenly shook his head and laughed out loud. His body and mind seemed to relax. In the afternoon in Connecticut, the wind was biting cold and the ground was frozen. Yenjika had just finished class when she received a call from Lu Cheng. He told her that Lin Kei had been rescued and that he was fine. He might even have good fortune in the future. Lu Cheng didn't mention the details over the phone. He only said that he would describe it in person over the Christmas holidays. The girl understood the meaning of the song and did not ask further. She put the textbook into her orange-red sling bag and walked out of the classroom. She only felt that the sky was blue and the air was cool. The clouds were high and far, making people feel relaxed. There was an indescribable pleasure and leisure. She strolled along the picturesque campus road. Suddenly, she saw a bouquet of red roses and smelled the faint fragrance of flowers. Alfred, who had eyes as blue as the sea, smiled brightly. "Sophia, may I have the honor of inviting you to dinner?" He and Yenjika had the same instructor, but they were not in the same group. His short blonde hair was flying in the wind, and he looked handsome. "I'm sorry," Yenjika answered directly. "I've asked around. You only go home every night and have no other plans. Sophia, they all think that you're old-fashioned and conservative, a girl without any charm. But I can see the beauty that you're hiding. But that's not the main point. What strongly attracts me is your soul, your wisdom, the way you make people consciously listen to you every time you speak, and the way you always surprise the teachers and everyone." Alfred could not help but express his surging emotions. Sophia was an American name that Yenjika gave herself. "That's your business. It has nothing to do with me." Yenjika laughed. Then she waved her left hand. "See, I have a boyfriend. No, I have a husband. This is our wedding ring." "Oh, that's impossible." Alfred was shocked. "I won't lie to others about this." Yenjika shook her head and planned to walk past him. Alfred was silent for a moment. Then he suddenly shouted, "I won't give up. Even if we are married, we have the freedom to pursue love, and the right to break up peacefully." Yenjika paused, turned around and looked at him deeply. Then she took out her phone and opened the recorder. She slowed down and said, "Can you hear what I'm saying?" "Yes." Alfred didn't know why. "Obviously, my ears didn't lose their function." "Very good." Yenjika nodded slightly. "Then I officially reject you. I'll tell you seriously that if you do anything like this again, I'll consider it as harassment. When the time comes, I'll inform my lawyer and apply for a restraining order. If the first time doesn't work, I'll do it twice. If the second time doesn't work, I'll do it 3 times. Trust me, I have the ability to take it. If you doubt my determination, I can call my lawyer right now." Alfred was stunned. He didn't understand why a normal pursuit would turn out like this. Sophia, don't you think you're overreacting?" he said, puzzled and frightened. Yenjika pursed her lips and smiled. "Overreacting now can save a lot of trouble in the future. After all, some people don't understand rejection. I hope you don't waste our time. Otherwise, I can only sue you for harassment." After saying that, She turned around and was about to leave. But at this time, she saw a big rock that was dug out and was about to be thrown away. So she smiled and politely said, "Also, I'm a martial artist." Before she finished, she took a step to the side and used force concentration. With a bang, she pulled out her right leg. The instep of her foot was straight in her boots. Bam! Smoke and dust rose. The rock cracked into many pieces of different sizes. Alfred stared blankly, his eyes full of fear. Yenjika pulled back her leg and walked steadily but slowly to the door. She saw Aunt Du, who had driven over to meet her. She opened the door and sat in the passenger seat. She wasn't in a hurry to put on her seatbelt. Instead, she bent down and rubbed her right foot painfully. She hadn't been practicing for the past few months. Her body had become delicate. That kick just now was so painful that she almost lost her composure. She took off her boots and socks. Seeing the red and swollen instep, she was so wronged that she almost burst into tears. Picking up her phone, Yenjika sent a resentful message to Lu Cheng. "It's all your fault." When Lu Cheng got the signal and saw the message, he was totally confused and bewildered. "What did I do wrong?" After returning from the war-torn zones and resuming his normal life, Lu Cheng continued to plan for Ku's winter break. As his ferry had a last-minute arrangement to attend the European Economic Summit Forum, which lasted for 5 days, he was wondering if he should get a visa so that they could meet in advance and travel. It just so happened that he was in the mastering period and didn't register for the Battle of the King's main competition. He wasn't in the top professional competition yet, so he had some free time. Thinking about this, Lu Cheng got out of the SUV and entered the club like he did the past few days. At this moment, Amon's phone began to vibrate. A call came in. After she picked it up, she nodded a few times and said, "Mr. Lu, Empress Luo wants you to go to her office." That sounds formal. Lu Cheng's sharp senses told him that something was amiss. He and Ning Zitong had each other's phone number in WeChat and would occasionally contact each other. If there was an emergency, there was no need for an assistant. Puzzled, he took the elevator to the 5th floor. As soon as he stepped out, he immediately felt the heavy atmosphere. This is the effect of a physical invulnerability, mighty one. As he pondered, Lu Cheng knocked on Ning Zitong's office door. Ning Zitong's tired voice sounded from the other side. "Come in." Lu Cheng pushed the door open and entered, only to see this peerless senior gently rubbing her temples. "Is something wrong?" he asked bluntly. "Everything was normal yesterday." Ning Zitong smiled bitterly and said, "Longjin just informed me that he won't be renewing his contract after it expires in January. He's going to join Haiyuan Club, which just got promoted to the top professional competition." "Why?" Lu Cheng asked instinctively. "Isn't this too sudden?" Even though Optimus Prime, Longjin often challenged Dragon King, and was always beaten to a pulp, he seemed to be enjoying it. Longjin is also a proud man. He wants to prove that he's not the one who basks in glory under Dragon King. That he's not the mighty one who's always ranked second. This isn't something that can be changed with a few titles. Therefore, he's joining Haiyuan and officially leading the team to challenge Longhu as an opponent. He's been waiting for this opportunity for a long time. Ning Zitong replied helplessly, "Haiyuan also has some military background, so there's no problem with the procedures." Although this was foreseeable, and as long as Longjun was still unconvinced and competitive, this would happen sooner or later. Did it have to happen so quickly and suddenly? He thought of Wu Maoyan, the current chief of Haiyuan Club, his master's old friend, and the self-proclaimed empty nest elder. He thought of which Qian Hui, Cheetah Li Yuanqi, and banished immortal Li Xiaoyuan, who joined them before graduating from university. With Longjun, they wouldn't be weak anymore. Ning Zitong lifted her cup and took a sip. She looked at Lu Cheng and said, "I originally wanted to wait until you've accumulated a wealth of experience in title battles, and have a better grasp of all aspects before letting you gradually get used to the top professional competition. Looks like I can't wait that long." Chapter 662. Without waiting for Lu Cheng's reply, Ning Zitong explained in more detail. "You've seen the club's matches. Dragon King, Longjun, and I are the main force. I'm getting on in years, so I have to learn to choose and conserve my energy in preparation for a title or two every year. This year, I participated in the Battle of the Masters and Battle of the Kings. I rarely participate in consecutive matches in the professional matches. Most of the time, I rotate with Lu Yan. At the age of 40 and above, except for a few freaks like Dong Baxian and Lu Yongyuan, the top physical invulnerability experts would rationally give up on mini-matches and spend half a year, or even a year accumulating their strength to fight for the honor of being second best in martial arts. Only in this way would they have a greater chance of carving a bloody path out of a group of formidable opponents. But even so, in the end, they would often fall in front of the Dragon King or the Warrior Sage, falling short of success. According to statistics, since the start of the legendary Twins era, at most 2 titles would be lost every year. Most of the time it would be 1. On rare occasions there would be no titles at all. This was even when Chen Qitao and Qian Donglu were both heavily injured. My silly disciple, Guo Jie, usually only plays in the less important matches in the professional matches or takes over when someone is injured. She can barely cope with her current level. If it were some other forces, she could be the main force. But our goal is to be number 1 in the world. Ning Zitong continued, half heartbroken and half self-deprecating. I'm not saying that her hard work in training is useless. And I'm not saying that there's something wrong with her obsession with martial arts. She might be able to achieve rank 1 in a decade or so, but the problem is imminent. At this point, Ning Zitong took a deep look at Lu Cheng and sighed. On the path of martial arts, talent is really important. Don't be fooled by the fact that the Dragon King is often described as having perversely strict self-discipline. However, his talent is only bad when compared to martial sages. He is no different from me and most of the top-notch experts who have obtained titles. In addition to his unrivaled desire to win and his frightening speed, he is already comparable to martial sages. Her foolish disciple might need 10 years to advance from rank 2 to rank 1. By that time, she would be in her 40s. As for the person in front of her, he might need 3 years, 2 years, or even sooner to enter the ranks of the contenders for the title. This was the gap. A gap that could not be made up for in a lifetime. I've even mastered the physical invulnerability chapter of my martial arts. Isn't Long Zhen's contract expiring in January? You can participate in the remaining 3 matches? Ning Zitong chuckled. Do you think Dragon King will let him fight again? Don't you want to prove your position? I, the Dragon King, will show you how insignificant you are. As long as the Dragon King is here, victory is here. That doesn't sound like something the Dragon King would say. Lu Qing pointed out. Although this was very much in line with the Dragon King's style, and even perfectly aligned with his psychological activities, with the Dragon King's personality and his domineering CEO demeanor, it was impossible for him to say such words. It wasn't that he didn't want to, but that he couldn't be bothered. What right do you have to make me say such things? Haha. Ning Zitong let out a dry laugh. I understand. Anyway, Long Zhen won't be part of the next 3 matches. You have to be prepared to be the main force. You can't always rely on me and Lu Yan, those 2 old men, to carry on, right? Especially the match this weekend. Lu Yan probably won't be able to fight. He's injured in the Battle of the Kings. He can force himself to fight, but it won't be good. This weekend, aren't we going north to Hudong to challenge Shangqing sect? Lu Qing recalled. And it was a crucial match to determine the champion of this year's top professional competition. The Dragon King sure is conceited. It's fine. Yun Yan is injured, and the rest are second pin, replied Ning Zitong with a smile. Ning Zitong replied with a smile. However, since we have a problem, she may also fight with injuries. Under normal circumstances, Shangqing sect's main force was warrior sage Qian Donglu, sect leader Daoist who had won 3 titles, and Daoist Yun Yan, who was a strong contender for the titles. Dragon King Chen Qitao, Empress Luo Ning Zitong, and Long Zhen were all part of the twin prides with 2 superclass members. They were the hot favorites for the top professional competition every year. In the second category were Daxing Temple, Yanjiao League, Shushan Study and Xinghai Club. They were mainly fighting for the 3rd place, but in the past decade, They had each made it into the top 2 and even won the glory of the top. They were not to be underestimated. Lu Qing nodded slowly. I understand. I'll prepare well. He had to go through the information and videos of the Shangqing sect mighty ones. Pulling himself together, Lu Qing left the office. Just as he was about to turn into his room, he saw Longzhen walking along the corridor towards the elevator. He was over 1 meters tall, with bronze skin and a shiny scalp. Wearing a loose-fitting martial arts suit, his mere presence gave off a strong sense of oppression. At this moment, he looked relaxed and lively. It was as though he had returned to nature after being in a cage for a long time. Lu Qing didn't expect to meet him directly. He felt a little awkward and didn't know what to say or what kind of attitude to present. Morning. Longzhen laughed heartily. After greeting him, he looked down at Lu Qing and said leisurely, "Wait until 5 years later. I believe you will make the same choice as me." Huh. Lu Qing was a little confused. At this moment, Longzhen stepped into the elevator, turned his huge body, and said in an ethereal tone, "Because we will always be proud." The door of the sedan chair closed slowly, blocking Lu Qing's line of sight. He was stunned for a moment. Suddenly, he remembered something his master once said. The best way to worship a martial artist was to catch up with him, face him, and defeat him. Looking at how Longzhen enjoyed being tortured, perhaps he really worshipped the Dragon King in his heart. Sighing, Lu Qing returned to his room and turned on his computer. There were videos of warrior sage Qian Dongluo's recent matches. At this moment, he suddenly remembered his original plan of traveling to Europe for a few days. Looks like it's over. Luckily I didn't mention it to Ku. Otherwise she would be disappointed. I don't have to get a visa for now. I can get it done earlier. Maybe in the future, I won't have to go through so much trouble. As his thoughts raced, Lu Qing sent a message to Amen and asked her to help him get visas for various countries in Europe. Europe was currently a loose alliance. It wasn't possible to get a single visa to go to different countries. While Lu Qing was training hard, Amen went to some consulates in Huaqing. Those that didn't have consulates here, she found one online. After the information was submitted, the obvious description of physical invulnerability triggered the danger alarm and gave the consular officers a shock. They didn't dare to act on their own accord. After confirming that Lu Qing from the Longhu Club had applied, they reported it to their respective security departments. In an office in Neo Country, a black-haired, blue-eyed man wearing a general's insignia glanced at the name and ordered his assistant firmly, "Reject. Reject his visa." "Why?" the assistant blurted out blankly. "Isn't this too casual? Should I check carefully?" Although he's a crown-level mighty one, it wasn't as if there hadn't been such people entering the country before. The black-haired, blue-eyed general leaned back and said, "Do you still remember the death of Dark Knight Bat?" "Yes. 3 mighty ones died in succession. Satha was besieged by Dark Knight Bat and the rest. We don't know who did the rest. Back then, there weren't any satellites monitoring this area, so we didn't take any precious photos," replied the assistant thoughtfully. Lieutenant General Aman has confirmed that Lu Qing is a confirmed mighty one in the area who chased the mummy all the way to Kukhang. "He's quite suspicious," said the general calmly. "But he's only a suspect. Mighty ones of this level can cross the desert in a few hours if they want to. Even those in Nile's capital, Dika, are suspicious," said the assistant, providing his opinion. Recently, the secret cooperation between the United States and Japan was destroyed. The crown level number 16 and number 18 died there. They made a mistake and incurred the wrath of the Hua nation. There's no need to protest. However, Lu Qing was involved in this matter, said the general. "I know about this. He's probably just a support." The assistant was still puzzled. The general was getting impatient. "Don't you get it? There are always crown-level mighty ones dying around Lu Qing. At least 2 at a time. We're not like America. We only have a few. Do you want them to all die? But this is just a coincidence, right? You can't use misfortune or disaster as a reason to reject his visa," argued the assistant, feeling a headache coming on. "At crown level, misfortune isn't fake. We have to treat it seriously. Who knows if it's another strange ability," said the general, tapping the table lightly. Do you understand? Yes. Then what reason should we use to reject his visa or not? Asked the assistant, seeking his superior's opinion. The general pondered for a moment. According to the John Wilbur Convention. You're kidding, right? Blurted the assistant, stunned. No. The general shook his head. Of course, you have to use its full name. Amen received a reply 2 days later. She glanced at Lu Qing beside her, and pursed her lips. She didn't know what to say. What's the matter? Asked Lu Qing, opening his eyes. Ox country has rejected your visa, replied Amen softly. Reason? Asked Lu Qing casually, frowning. Amen hesitated for a few seconds. John Wilbur Convention on the Restriction of High-Danger Weapons. P.S. I went to see the doctor and he said it's still in the early stages, so it's not that serious. The treatment plan he gave me is exactly the same as one of my friends in the comments. Take hormones and neurotropic drugs first, then get the face pierced a few days later. If the situation doesn't worsen and I'm getting better, then there's no need for the treatment. Yeah, I did get a few injections today on my hands, feet, and stomach to relax muscles and promote blood circulation. He also reminded me to rest well and not stay up late. So, I'm going to take a leave of absence today and adjust my work and rest schedule together with the previous one. Once I'm fully recovered, the chapters starting tomorrow will not be affected until I get the injections. Despite Lu Yan's unsmiling face, Lu Qing, who had been paying attention to the Longhu Club for many years, knew very well how excited he could be after defeating a strong opponent. He might even do some provocative things, such as rushing to the enemy's seat to celebrate. This wasn't an immature behavior that only happened when he was young. This had happened twice already this year. Ning Zitong, who had changed into a long dress, and her disciple, Guojia, sat in the middle. One of them was talking about feminine topics, while the other was nodding along nonchalantly. Their assistants were scattered around them, each doing their own thing. Lu Qing nodded in acknowledgement, and casually chose an empty seat by the window. Amen and Guojia's assistant, Wang Yueshi, sat together and started chatting in low voices. A few minutes later, the bus started moving out of the city and onto the highway, heading north. Although they were heading north, Hudong wasn't too far north. Not only was it not comparable to the Guanwai League, it didn't even cross the Yangtze River, and was just adjacent to Guangnan. However, according to the customs of the people of Huaqing, the north of Huaqing was called the north. It was because of this that they didn't take the high-speed rail, and instead traveled by themselves. The two drivers took turns and arrived at Sky Thunder Mountain, where the Shangqing sect was located, in the middle of the night. After resting for a few hours at the hotel they had booked, Lu Qing and the rest began their adaptability training. Due to the impending battle, they didn't engage in any group battles. After a day of adjustment, they boarded the bus again at 2 in the afternoon and headed up the winding mountain road. The road was full of twists and turns, pine forests, and valleys dotted with thin snow. On one side was a cliff, and on the other was a bottomless abyss. The terrain was dangerous and the environment was serene. After passing the Wansong Hill, there were 8 Shangqing sect disciples in blue robes guarding the hill. In ancient times, this place was called Sword Dispelling Cliff. All visitors had to leave behind their weapons before they could continue up the hill. This wasn't much of a restriction for martial artists who were proficient in martial arts. It was just a matter of courtesy. The 8 disciples stood to the left and right, bowing and greeting the members of the Longhu Club. Ning Zitong retracted her gaze from the window and flipped through the newspaper that her assistant had bought. She lamented and complained. The newspapers these days are getting worse and worse. Other than advertisements, there's still more advertisements. Back in the day, a duel like this would be a full-page feature. From the setup of the home team, the recent battles of both sides, their respective performances, all sorts of sensational and motivational content, there was everything. The writing was good too. Now there's still a feature, but one look and you can tell that it's just half-hearted and half-hearted. It's the era of self-media now. Many web portals are slacking off. They don't plan much themselves and are mainly reposting other people's work, let alone newspapers. Sitting behind Ning Zitong, Lu Qing held his phone and said with a smile. As for the comments online, most of them were about the Dragon King being too conceited, overconfident, and impulsive. At times like this, it was only right to let Longjun shine. The other plans were too dangerous and uncertain. So much has changed in the past 10 years. Ning Zitong sighed. She changed the topic and said, Shangqing sect requested not to have spectators for this duel. I'm afraid they're up to something. In other words, to improve their home field advantage, replied Lu Yan unsurprised. Ever since Dragon King, Chen Qitao, boarded the car, his eyes were closed. He didn't reveal any of his spiritual will, as though he was a clay puppet. Guojia, on the other hand, seized the time to study the videos of the mighty ones from Shangqing sect. She didn't care if she had the chance to fight. Coaster went around the sword-dispelling cliff, passed through the 5 immortal crutches, and arrived at the car park outside the Shangqing sect. The Longhu club team, led by Chen Qitao, went down in a single file. The reporters who could only watch took photos and videos like crazy. After entering the Shangqing sect, Amen and the other assistants stopped, and were led away for tea by the receptionist. The few physical and vulnerability experts continued up. They passed through the courtyard, stepped on the stone steps, and reached the peak. This place got its name from being struck by lightning all year round. There wasn't a hint of snow, and it was barren except for rocks. As they approached, the ring on his finger was disturbed by a magnetic field, and showed signs of restlessness. Thunder and lightning fell from the sky, generating magnetism. But that wasn't the main point. The main point was that there were now 9 thick electric poles on the previously barren mountaintop. High-voltage power lines connected the poles from below. In the middle of the high-voltage power line stood a white-robed Taoist with a crown on his head. He had delicate features, and the corners of his clothes fluttered in the strong wind. He was the warrior sage Qian Donglu. Dragon King, Chen Qitao's half-closed eyes suddenly opened. He looked over and made eye contact with the other party. Suddenly, lightning flashed high up in the sky. It was as if it had struck an invisible tree, burning it up out of thin air. With a faint purple flame, it fell to the ground with crackling sounds, turning into small snakes that flowed away, leaving behind only scorch marks. Retracting his gaze, Chen Qitao didn't take another look. He took the lead and walked into the distance. There were a few futons by the edge of the cliff. Those were the guest team seats. All of this had the simple charm of a battle from a few hundred years ago. However, the thick electric poles and high-voltage power lines that separated the sky ruined the feeling. So they're going to use the high-voltage power. Ning Zitong smiled in realization. There was a solemn look on her face. Lu Qing nodded at Peng Liyun and sat down cross-legged. He heard Coach Lu Yan say, "The warrior sage is planning to be the first to battle. Although we have a higher chance of winning if we take him down first and let you, Dragon King, take him on, I'm afraid he'll be unstoppable with today's setup. When the time comes, he'll carry the momentum of his accumulated victories with him. Hence, it's still better for you to take the lead." "Just right." Chen Qitao nodded slightly. There seemed to be a raging purple flame burning in his eyes. Lu Yan turned to Lu Qing and suddenly asked, "Are you confident?" "Huh." Lu Qing didn't react immediately. What kind of question is that? Lu Yan took a step forward, looked straight into his eyes, and said in a deep voice, "If you're not confident and feel fearful, I'll do it myself." Lu Qing immediately straightened his back and answered firmly, "Yes." "Yes. P.S. In the process of adjusting my schedule, this chapter has fewer words." Chapter 664. Lu Yan and Lu Qing stared at each other for a dozen seconds before retracting their gazes. "Then go show them your confidence." After saying that, he looked around and said, "I'm sorry. We don't know if Shangqing sect will send Taoist Yin Yan, but since they've set up such a formation, they must be planning to break through with brute force. The strongest will break through, the second strongest will penetrate, and the weaker one will finish the job. Logically speaking, this is the most reliable way for us to deal with them. However, our strength is similar to theirs to begin with, and they have a slight advantage over us. Plus, they've put in so much effort to set up this home ground advantage. If we do this step by step, we won't have much of a chance of winning. Once we fall behind, we'll fall further and further behind until the end, and it'll be hard to turn the tables. That's why we need to make some changes. Dragon King, hold off Warrior Sage and completely break his spirit, or at least push him to his limits. Lu Cheng, you'll go second. Don't be careless. A starving camel is still bigger than a horse. Even at his limits, Warrior Sage still has the ability to defeat you. You have to do your best to take him down. Then drag the match out as long as possible to wear down. Lu Yan glanced at the paper in his hand. Wear down Taoist Wu Guang. I have more confidence in you in this aspect. While he was setting up, Dragon King Chen Chitao's eyes were deep and dignified, like a volcano waiting to erupt from the depths of the earth. He didn't comment on wear down his spirit, or push him to his limits. Before Lu Cheng and Ning Zitong could speak, Lu Yan continued, when this match ends, as long as we can drag it out long enough, Shangqing Sect's preparations will be destroyed. The home ground advantage will solidify, and the impact on us will be minimized. Having said that, he turned to look at Empress Luo. If you can finish off Taoist Wu Guang quickly, you'll have an advantage over the injured Yun Yan, Ming He, Peng Liyun, and the rest. As for how much of an advantage you have, and whether it can offset the home ground advantage, it'll depend on what Lu Cheng can do, and how quickly you can finish off Taoist Wu Guang. Only by accumulating strength step by step will we have a chance of winning. If we make the slightest mistake, everything will be over. We're all physical invulnerability experts with plenty of battle experience. I'm sure you know what to do. Go all out and fight for every single step. After doing all this, Lu Yan personally handed over the name list to the referees of the same level, and found out who the third main player of the Shangqing sect was. It was not the injured superclass Yin Yan, nor was it the longtime second-class Ming He and the others. It was the newly promoted Peng Liyun. He now had a nice nickname, Immortal Outside the Clouds. Beyond the Clouds originated from his name, but it was also because he was often in a daze, his mind wandering beyond the heavens. Peng Liyun is a little strange, Lu Yan said as he returned to the cliff. Maybe there's something surprising about him. Ning Zitong put away her usual expression, and said with a calm smile. At this moment, she felt like she was looking down on the heroes of the world. She was once the #1 physical invulnerability expert. In those years she wasn't called Empress Luo, but Ghost King. Ghost King Ning Zitong, Taoist priest, made another breakthrough? Lu Cheng tried to recall the messages he had received in the group chat recently, but he didn't remember Peng Liyun mentioning anything like that. This kid has a lock on his mouth. While Lu Cheng was lost in his thoughts, the referee walked to the center of the arena, avoiding a spot where the high-voltage wires could fall. He signaled that the match was about to begin. Dragon King Chen Chitao, who had been silent since the start of the match, stood up abruptly. The air around him surged upward, turning red and spraying everywhere. At this moment, it was as though a volcano had erupted, and the temperature around him rose steadily. He didn't punch, kick, or flick his wrist. Just the act of standing up was already so powerful. Seeing this, the warrior sage Qian Donglu, who was still standing on the high-voltage power line, smiled casually. He didn't react. Instead, he put his hands behind his back. His white Taoist robe was spotless, as if it had been washed over and over again. Dragon King approached step by step, and the referee kept retreating. When both parties were facing each other, he raised his right hand and announced, "Conversation time starts now." Qian Donglu looked down at Chen Chitao from above. His tone was natural and light, as though he was overjoyed. "We haven't fought for more than half a year, right?" "After 5 months," Dragon King replied curtly. "In the past 6 months, I've made some discoveries and created 3 new moves. I'd like to invite you to evaluate them," Qian Donglu said leisurely with a smile on his face. Upon hearing this, Lu Cheng was speechless. He was filled with emotions. God-slaying saber Lu Yongyuan had spent 20 years to break free from his confinement and shackles. He had a unique understanding of the 9-move saber techniques that truly belonged to him. Qian Donglu, on the other hand, had created 3 new moves in less than half a year. New moves that could be used against Dragon King were as easy as picking up cabbages from the market. Furthermore, similar incidents were happening all the time. This was also why Qian Donglu's martial arts talent was unique in this world. It was also why he was known as the one in 1,000 years. Chen Qitao listened quietly before replying slowly. Mastery in one's work, and waste in complexity. Despite all the changes, the original is still the same. This one is in my hands, Qian Donglu chuckled. His body suddenly swayed, rising and falling with the wind. His surroundings came to life, no longer as rigid as before. Instead, they were filled with the interest of nature. At this moment, he seemed to have become one with heaven and earth. At this moment, he had transformed from Qian Donglu into warrior sage. Even though Dragon King's aura was soaring to the heavens and rolling waves of heat, he was repelled. After staring at each other in silence for a while, Qian Donglu slowly raised his right hand. Under the afternoon sun, it glowed faintly like white jade. The first move, Sky Splitter, is like the splitting of the heavens, Qian Donglu said slowly. At this moment, the referee seemed to have coordinated with him and announced, "Begin." Bam! Warrior Sage's palm struck down. Bright electric arcs instantly formed, twisting and thickening, like a crack in the heavens. This sky splitter engulfed the surroundings, including Qian Donglu's figure, and struck down with the same emotionless force of all things. At the same time, two high-voltage wires snapped, swinging away rapidly as if they were being pulled. The ends of the wires ejected silvery white and exaggerated electric arcs, transforming into whips that lashed at Chen Qitao. Bzzzt, bzzzt, bzzzt. Affected by this, 8 electric snakes sprang up in the form of pythons and pounced at Qian Donglu from all directions. If not for the gaps in the electric arcs, no one would have been able to avoid them at the speed of light. In a short moment, Dragon King was ambushed from all sides. Apart from the soles of his feet, he was attacked from all directions. It seemed that he had no choice but to face the attacks head-on and break through first. That was what Chen Qitao did, but he didn't choose the relatively weaker 8 electric pythons, nor did he consider the silvery white long whips, which were limited by the speed of the falling wires. Bam! The ground beneath his feet cracked open, lava gushing out, and scorching air rising, propelling him through the encirclement of the electric pythons and long whips. He clenched his fist and struck upwards. He was attacking Qian Donglu's strongest point. A heavy purple blanket, the high temperature distorting the air current, struck the descending sky splitter. Boom! The silvery white and lavender colors were like exploding fireworks. They were extremely dazzling and scattered downwards, almost drenching Lu Cheng and the others. A jade-white palm appeared and struck Qian Donglu's tightly clenched fingers. Warrior Sage Qian Donglu's vanished figure reappeared, and was thrown diagonally upwards. He did a somersault in midair and descended at a much faster speed than normal, as though something on the ground was pulling him. Electricity generates magnetism. Magnetism is different. Bam! At that moment, Qian Donglu transformed into a bolt of lightning and struck towards Chen Qitao's head, who was having trouble changing directions in midair. In such a situation, he might not be able to dodge if he hastily ignited the flame force in his body. But just as Qian Donglu was about to land, a gust of wind blew, changing Dragon King's direction and gliding to the ground. This was a hurricane created by the large difference in temperature. This was the hidden variation of Chen Qitao's punch. Fire generates wind, and wind fuels fire. He had used the unique skills of the fire sect to great effect. Seeing Dragon King avoid the attack and land steadily, Lu Qing couldn't help but praise. Cool. Immediately after, he realized that Chen Qitao was about to take a step. Regardless of whether Chen Qitao could hear him or react in time, he quickly shouted, "Jump!" If a high-voltage wire was placed in that area, one would be electrocuted if they took a step forward. At that moment, he had to pretend that he had consumed the half-step crazy smile. Dragon King seemed to be taking a step, but he wasn't. He leaped and changed his position, avoiding the electric shock. He had fought with Qian Donglu many times. Qian Donglu had often conducted sneak attacks by channeling electricity into the ground. He had long been at a disadvantage. Seeing this, Lu Qing heaved a sigh of relief. Then he realized that Ning Zitong, Lu Yan, and Guojie were looking at him strangely. Cough. He cleared his throat and returned his gaze to the battlefield. What are you looking at? Haven't you seen other people's fans? Chapter 665. Missing his target, the warrior sage, Qian Donglu, suddenly hovered in midair. He didn't descend as expected, as though there was an invisible rope for him to step on, or the peak of the mountain was pushing him up. His sleeves fluttered as he looked at the Dragon King, Chen Qitao, who had changed his position and laughed. The crack of the heavens can be mended, but the calamity of man cannot be saved. Just as he finished his sentence, he plummeted like an eagle pouncing on its prey. Ferocious, fast and sharp. His two hands, which were curved into claws, contained disc-like electric arcs that grew petal by petal. How could Chen Qitao just stand there and let him attack? He immediately shifted his steps and turned his body, stirring up gusts of wind in the air. Wherever he was close to the ground, he would change his stride into a leap to avoid being affected. A pounce followed by a pause. There seemed to be an elastic rope tied to Qian Donglu's back that allowed him to swing up and down in midair. Sometimes he pounced, sometimes he was lifted. No one knew when the lightning would strike, or where it would strike. This forced Chen Qitao to constantly change his position, allowing him to be completely manipulated. The warrior sage made full use of the magnetic field to gain the supernatural ability of flight. Normally, he would have had to undergo a long battle and change the environment to achieve this in other places. At this moment, he seemed to be in an undefeatable position. Locked in by his aura, Chen Qitao couldn't free his hands to attack the air. He had to be on guard against his opponent's thunderous attack. If he was distracted by other things, he might reveal his flaws. Amidst the undulations, Chen Qitao moved to a certain area. A talisman inscribed with green jade and silver lightning suddenly appeared in Qian Donglu's eyes. At the point where the high-voltage wires were connected to the ground, the electric arcs that had been dispersed by the peak of the mountain were suddenly triggered. They soared upwards like a blooming sunflower. They formed a cage, trapping the Dragon King Chen Qitao. They kept shrinking towards the center, as though trying to envelop him. At this moment, Qian Donglu fell rapidly as though he was being pulled by the ground. He finally unleashed the thunderous attack that had been hanging in everyone's hearts. He bent his 10 fingers and extended them forward. He locked onto his opponent from afar and shot out lightning snakes one after another. Amidst the closing petals of the electric sunflower, Chen Qitao used the same trick again. He stomped his feet and soared into the sky. His fists were like gushing purple lava, roaring towards Qian Donglu. His legs were trembling slightly, and his trousers were making crackling sounds. To a certain extent, he was affected by the arc of light and was affected by it. Just as the previous collision was about to repeat, Qian Donglu seemed to be pushed by an invisible hand on the mountaintop. He leaped over Chen Qitao's dragon-like fist and appeared above him. Pa! Qian Donglu stretched out his left leg and kicked at the back of his opponent's head with lightning snakes coiling around it, taking advantage of the opponent's weakness when he was at the end of his moves. The fish flies in shallow water, and the eagle soars in the sky. Lu Cheng sucked in a breath of cold air, and didn't even blink. If it were him, there would be no way to salvage the situation. Suddenly, a faint purple fireball condensed behind Chen Qitao's head, but it instantly disintegrated. Boom! The rolling waves of flames were inseparable. They either supported Qian Donglu's feet or slapped at Dragon King's head. The former bounced off as if he had stepped on a spring. Dragon King extended his neck and allowed the flames to hit him, taking advantage of the upward momentum and bulging muscles. After the initial frenzy, the flames seemed to have turned into little snakes, swimming docilely on Dragon King's head and body. He looked majestic, as if the real Emperor Yin had reappeared. This move originated from 9 rotations of 5 flames. Descent of the Sun. Lu Cheng was amazed. I've only just started on the path of controlling flames. Just as he was thinking, Warrior Sage, who had been sent flying by the shockwave, turned around and clapped his palms together. There wasn't a trace of smoke or fire, as if he had planned for this combo all along. Boom! A thunderclap in the clear sky shook Lu Cheng and the rest, who were watching from afar. On the battlefield, Dragon King, who had yet to land, was even more visibly shaken. Pa! Qian Donglu pulled his palms apart and pulled out a thin blade of purple light. Like real lightning, it struck Chen Qitao as soon as it appeared. The ninth move of the Thunder sect, Thunder from a Clear Sky. Cloudless Thunder Blade. Against this move, if one didn't notice it and avoid it beforehand, there was no way they could dodge it. In terms of speed, it was far superior to Flying Dragon takedown of Xinjai sect and Lu Yongyuan's Extreme Lightning. In the blink of an eye, from Chen Qitao's left cheek to his neck to his right chest, a hideous, charred wound appeared. There were still traces of electric snakes swimming inside, causing him to fall into an uncontrollable paralysis and fall to the ground like a stone. This cloudless thunder blade had unparalleled speed, but it didn't have the power that came with it. It could only hurt like high-voltage electric arcs. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been able to reach such speed. Retracting his chi and blood and restraining the paralysis, Dragon King didn't panic. He methodically used force concentration to dispel the remaining effects on his body. Before his feet touched the ground, Qian Donglu was pulled down by the ground again and struck down. This time, the sky was gloomy and dark clouds gathered. Bolts of silver-white electric snakes leaped among them, growing stronger and stronger. Boom, boom, boom. Thick bolts of lightning struck down like water washing the ground. Accompanied by the martial saint's repeated strikes and leaps, Chen Qitao was tired of dealing with them. His hair stood on end and his body trembled intermittently. However, these intervals were getting shorter and shorter. With the advantage of his home ground, he finally gained the upper hand and firmly suppressed his opponent. In such a heavenly tribulation, Chen Qitao didn't panic. He was injured but didn't fall. He responded with heavy purple flames and ferocious blast punches, sending sparks and electric arcs in all directions. The temperature of the surroundings rose, and more than half of the battlefield showed signs of drying up. Even from a distance, Lu Qing could feel the heat when he breathed, almost burning his qi passage. This was the qi passage of a fire sect physical invulnerability expert, one that had been honed multiple times in the volcano laboratory. If it had been a martial artist below the inhuman stage, he would have been severely injured and on the verge of death, unless he stopped breathing. Mirage suffocating hell. Lu Qing muttered thoughtfully. This was the eighth move of the fire sect. It mainly changed the environment to create a high-temperature space that was advantageous to the user. It made it difficult for the opponent to breathe and create visual differences due to the density of the air. It also affected the movement of the organs and the ability to think due to the scorching air. This was an indiscriminate damage. However, martial artists who were good at controlling fire and had been honed in the volcano laboratory were like fish in water. Even if they were more powerful, they would be less affected than their opponent if they exceeded the limits. Beside him, Lu Yan's lips quivered as he said softly, "Dragon King is making use of this to slowly turn the situation around. He is also destroying the surrounding environment to weaken his home ground advantage and pave the way for the rest of you." Lu Qing nodded in realization. Shortly after, he had a question. If this goes on, will the clothes ignite on their own and burn to ashes? At that time, the scene would be too beautiful to look at. Lu Yan tilted his head and gave him an odd look. Our martial arts suits have been reinforced with fireproof materials. The Shangqing sect should have done the same. How could he not know such common sense? Haha. Lu Qing laughed dryly. So that's how it is. Can't you allow me to be a martial arts fanatic for the next few months? After a fierce battle, the temperature of the ground rose rapidly. Qian Donglu's descending and leaping movements were no longer as effortless as before. However, he could still borrow the momentum to fly high and fall naturally. Along with the lightning spat out by the dark clouds, wave after wave, the nine heavens united. Chen Qitao was on the verge of collapsing. Tiny electric snakes slithered on the surface of his skin as the power of his punches and kicks weakened. Suddenly his movements slowed. Qian Donglu immediately turned into a bolt of lightning and struck mercilessly. Against the backdrop of the dark clouds and dancing lightning snakes, he went straight for his opponent's vitals. Without a sound, Chen Qitao swung his left fist to the side. Layers and layers of purple flames covered his fist, making it unimaginably heavy. It actually caused the martial saint in mid-air to change his direction and collide with it. The purple flames didn't dissipate and stuck firmly to Qian Donglu's palm. Meanwhile, the lonely light drilled into Qin Chitao's body, electrifying him. Amidst the trembling, Qin Chitao raised his right arm as though he was prepared. His 5 fingers clenched into an empty fist, as though he had covered an area and grasped the surrounding nature. Looking from afar, Lu Qing had the feeling that the area was completely isolated. Heaven and earth were turned upside down, and nothing was left unscathed. In a situation where he couldn't turn the tables, Qin Chitao chose to exchange injury for victory and retaliate forcefully. Restriction Sect, Clear Jade Chapter. Chapter 666. Clenching his fist, Qin Chitao's palm was empty. The faint purple and crimson flames behind him merged into his fist. This punch was connected to the 9 rotations of 5 flames, descent of the sun. If he wanted to unleash its full power, he would need to incorporate the faint purple, blazing white, light blue, golden, and crimson fireballs. However, in his haste, the Dragon King chose to reduce the number of fireballs, so that Qian Donglu wouldn't have a chance to break free. As the punch landed, the surroundings turned dark. All light seemed to have been sucked dry. A vast and boundless aura burst forth, making Qin Chitao look like a deity, capable of overturning the heavens with a flip of his hand. Even from afar, Lu Qing felt like he was the only one left in this world. He couldn't imagine what it would be like to face it head-on. This punch seems to have strengthened the mental aspect. Different from most physical invulnerability moves and pure mental secret arts, it's more like God-slaying Saber Lu Yongyuan's final move, Eternal Silence. However, it's obviously more profound, powerful, and terrifying. This thought came to Lu Qing as he pondered. Could it be that the taboo is to fully develop one's mental realm and control one's brain? When that happens, reality and illusion will fly together, and both matter and mind will be balanced. While he was floating in the air, the martial saint reacted. He used Qin Chitao's left fist as a support point, and with a shake of his wrist he flew backwards, forcibly pulling his opponent forward by 1 step. It was this step that made the Dragon King, who was near the contact point of the rupture of the high-voltage wire, feel an electric current flowing through his legs. Trembling, Qian Donglu's descending fist slowed down. Taking advantage of his opponent's pull, Qian Donglu pounced like an eagle. His right hand clenched into a fist and struck his opponent's wrist diagonally, avoiding the point of contact. During this process, his eyes lit up like lightning. The crown on his head fell apart, and his hair spread out like needles. Countless silvery white strands swam through his hair. It was a long story, but in reality, it was a change of pulling and pouncing. Qian Donglu didn't hastily respond with a big move of the same level. Instead, he went back to basics, using the simplest of punches and kicks to neutralize and counter, turning something rotten into something magical. With this move alone, he lived up to his title as the warrior sage. Boom! In an instant, the airflow expanded and swept outwards violently. Lu Cheng, Lu Yan, and the rest felt their vision go dark. When the light returned, they saw that Qian Donglu's right arm was bent at an odd angle, with bones protruding from his skin. It was a hair-raising sight. The Dragon King, on the other hand, was spasming visibly from his right wrist. The closer it was to his wrist, the more intense the spasms were. His left fist, which had absorbed Qian Donglu's heavy purple flames, dissipated, but Qian Donglu managed to grab hold of the last bit of strength. The goshawk flew backward and then charged forward. It was as if there was an invisible rope between the warrior sage and the Dragon King. In the background, several drones in charge of broadcasting were affected by electromagnetic waves and heat waves. They were either directly damaged or malfunctioned, and fell to the ground. Pulling on the rope, Qian Donglu tightened his body in midair, lowered his waist and shoulders, and crashed into Qin Chitao's chest like a meteorite. Crack! Although the Dragon King hurriedly retracted his left arm, expanded his chest and abdomen muscles, and ignited a thin fire shield, he was still knocked out of his stance. His joints were bent, and his chest bones were broken. Bang! He flew backward, his back colliding with a high-voltage electric pole. He broke the pole and flew up, tearing apart several wires. The high voltage penetrated the air and drew out electric arcs, creating a scene of fireworks in midair. With a successful move, Qian Dongluo's feet finally landed on the ground. He lowered his waist, bounced up, and appeared beside Chen Qitao. He was so fast that it was like a flash of lightning, arriving at almost the same time as the sound of breaking air. This speed was only slower than the transient steps. The fourth style of the Thunder sect, Swift Thunder. If not for his injuries, the warrior sage could also exceed the speed of sound with his full strength. This was why the warrior sage was called the warrior sage. He could quickly pick up, master, and come up with new ideas. He was different from his predecessors. Once he understood something, he would be able to understand it all. Almost all the martial artists of the same generation as him had tasted despair. Bang! Amidst the explosion, Qian Dongluo's already charred and tattered white robe was torn apart. He shook his left hand, turned his fist into a palm, and pressed forward. The green lightning in his palm formed a talisman, like a seal of thunder, containing a sense of danger and terror. The fifth style of the Thunder sect, Universal Green Book. This move was mainly used for paralysis. It could mix lightning into a thunderball and create an explosive force in the electric shock. More frightening was that it could affect and manipulate the lightning of the natural world and the enemy to a certain extent. Don't fight Shangqing sect physical invulnerability experts in thunderstorms. Don't fight Shangqing sect disciples unless there's a difference in realm and level. These were the two universally recognized rules in the Chinese martial arts circle, and even the entire world's supernatural realm. Back then, Vagar took advantage of the fact that he was close to physical invulnerability and stronger than Peng Liyun to launch a surprise attack to break the prejudices of his predecessors. In the end, not only was he heavily injured, but he also helped Peng Liyun make the great leap. Bang! Chen Qitao's expression was resolute. He didn't admit defeat. Even though his sternum was almost completely broken, it didn't stop him from punching with his right fist, using Emperor Yan against Green Book. At the same time, his broken left arm drooped down. With a shake of his shoulder, he used the injured area like a whip, whipping out a cluster of purple flames that burned close to the ground. It swam silently, but danger lurked within. Bang, bang, bang. The warrior sage and dragon king kept switching positions, engaging in close-range combat. At times, the purple lightning and green lightning would increase, and at other times, the flames would wreak havoc. If Dragon King was below the inhuman stage, he wouldn't be far from death. Even at the inhuman stage, he would have lost most of his combat ability. However, he was still fighting hard, repeatedly using force concentrations. There wasn't a hint of pain on his face, as though he had lost his senses. A few minutes later, both of them reached their maximum speed. Their figures separated again. Chen Qitao crashed through 3 high-voltage electric poles and landed outside the designated battlefield. Qian Dongluo's hair was messy and smoking. There were several wounds on his body. Purple flames danced in his mangled flesh, turning the surroundings pitch black. The referee stood in the distance, raised his right hand and shouted, "The warrior sage wins." Chen Qitao took a deep breath. Finally, a pained expression appeared on his face. Frowning, he extended his right hand and realigned his bones, connecting them one by one so that the terrifying recovery ability of a physical invulnerability expert could take effect. Turning around, he straightened his back in his tattered navy blue martial arts suit and walked towards the away team seats. Lu Cheng, on the other hand, had already stood up when the referee announced the result. "Your opponent is him," said Chen Qitao in a deep voice, flames dancing in his eyes. Lu Cheng realized that he had subconsciously moved to the side in an attempt to welcome Dragon King. He didn't enter the arena, and directly started the second round. At this very moment, Qian Donglu was realigning his bones with great familiarity. Although this wouldn't allow him to recover immediately, it would at least lessen the pain, and not affect the rest of the match. "Yeah, I have to hurry. I can't give the warrior sage more time to heal." Lu Cheng retracted his gaze and raised his right hand, as though he was going to high-five Dragon King before rushing to the battlefield. But do physical invulnerability experts need high-fives and cheers? Isn't this too childish and naive? This didn't seem to happen in the past. While Lu Cheng was hesitating, Chen Qitao walked past him slowly and suddenly said, "Beat him." His tone was deep and dignified. "Okay." Lu Qing blurted out. He turned and walked to the center of the arena, carefully avoiding the fallen high-voltage electric poles. Qian Donglu's right arm hung limply, but his body wasn't floating in the air. He stood there, looking devastated, but leisurely, smiling as he waited for his opponent to approach. Lu Cheng's heartbeat quickened. This was a 1-in-1,000 years martial arts genius. Other than the taboo Mighty One, he was the man closest to that domain, a terrifying Mighty One who had traumatized many physical invulnerability experts. The scariest thing was that he was only 33 years old. He was at the peak of his mental, physical, and experience. This peak could last for at least another 10 or even 15 years. The shadow of the warrior sage would cast a shadow over several generations of mighty ones. Of course, he might break through in a few years and stop playing with kids. Even if he was severely injured, no one dared to look him in the eye. Can I beat him? Can I really beat him? For a moment, Lu Qing was nervous. His heart was pounding, and his body couldn't help but tremble. If the Dragon King was his idol, then the warrior sage was the ultimate opponent in his childhood fantasies. Am I finally going to face him? Unlike the relaxed feeling he had when he drew the same piece in the master battle, or at least pretended to be relaxed, Lu Cheng's palms were hot, and his forehead was sweating. If he lost that time, so be it. But this time if he lost, Long Hu might lose the title of world number 1 this year. At this thought, Lu Qing stood in his position and visualized the ice heart. He calmed his emotions and allowed himself to look down from above. Qian Donglu glanced at him. Before the referee raised his hand, he smiled and said, "It's a pity that I have to fight you under such circumstances. But I've created a left-handed saber technique. It's suitable for this situation." Left-handed saber technique? Do you have to be so free? If you weren't so free, you would have long been banned. Lu Qing didn't restrain his urge to complain. After this, he felt a little more relaxed. He was no longer facing an invincible scourge. At this moment, Peng Liyin sat up straight. Yan Xiaoling and the rest, who were watching the match, clenched their fists. At this moment, Yan Zheka, who had already woken up, Lin Kei, who was recuperating at home, and Kai Zhongming, who was commenting, all focused on the screen. At this moment, the referee raised his right hand and shouted, "Round 2 begin." Lu Cheng's first match against the warrior sage, Qian Donglu, began. They couldn't help but feel timid and tremble with fear. As if they were the 1,000-year-old locust trees in the folklore, beings of extreme yin. Pa. Qian Donglu seemed to have become the celestial lord who ruled over the Thunder sect. As his palms struck down, everyone felt a heavy weight on their bodies and minds. The purple lightning that was generated continued to dance, as though it was brewing up various changes. It was both real and illusory, with a hidden trump card. This blade was derived from the 6th style of the Thunder sect, the purple seal of the celestial venerable. It was supported by spiritual suppression, and it was extremely righteous, yang, and firm. The lightning tribulation was ferocious, and its power was terrifying. Once it came into contact, all 9 tribulations would fall. When Qian Donglu was close to him, Lu Qing had been observing him. However, he still couldn't grasp the one hidden by his opponent. He couldn't determine what his final change would be. Even with the ice heart reflection, he could only understand the objective situation. He couldn't synthesize the information and make the most accurate judgment in an instant. When the warrior sage transformed into the celestial lord of the Thunder sect and suppressed his heart and mind, he finally made a decision. It wasn't too early, but it wasn't too late either. His enemy heart freezing move was crystal clear and solid. Under the might of the Thunder tribulation, only a few cracks appeared. This allowed Lu Qing to not need the confrontation formula or the forwarding formula and not be affected by fear. He calmly moved his shoulders, straightened his knees, and dodged to the side. At the same time, he stirred up a ferocious gust of wind that slammed towards Qian Donglu. However, at this moment, it was as though there was an invisible rope between him and Qian Donglu. The moment he changed directions, the connection tightened. Together with the warrior sage, the distance between them decreased instead of increasing. Pa. Qian Donglu's heavy left palm suddenly sped up. Purple lightning gathered, illuminating the surroundings that seemed to be the calm before the storm. A thick bolt of lightning suddenly appeared between the heavens and earth. At this moment, Lu Qing had no choice but to ignite the small amount of Emperor Yen force in his body. In an instant he changed directions and flew diagonally, making a strange turn. Bam! Purple lightning swept across, stirring up smoke and dust on the ground. It was bare and cracked. Qian Donglu didn't raise his arm again. Shifting his center of gravity, he moved his body first and pounced towards Lu Cheng, who had yet to land on the ground. His left palm landed behind him, like a long saber being dragged forward. The tip of the saber rubbed against the ground at high speed, creating a series of sparks. The appearance of the sparks ignited the already hot air in the surroundings. Whoosh! Within a radius of 20 to 30 meters, a single spark started a prairie fire. Crimson flames roiled as Qian Donglu's saber leaped towards Lu Cheng, who was in midair. Since ancient times, lightning strikes were often followed by fire. The Shangqing sect had deep knowledge in this aspect. The third move of the Thunder sect was called Divine Golden Flames. Other than being an explosive technique to squeeze out one's potential, it was also the study of lightning strikes and fire burns. At this moment, Qian Donglu had cleverly used the fire sect battle environment created by the Dragon King. Crack! The flames in midair burned through two high-voltage wires. They swung downwards, dragging bright electric arcs that pierced through the air. They whipped towards Lu Qing from both sides. At this critical juncture, Lu Qing took a deep breath and ignited the second stage. Boom! With the explosion of some Emperor Yen force, he changed his original direction and retreated rapidly, avoiding the whip of thunder punishment and most of the flames. The remaining crimson flames flowed over his head, his skin, and his clothes. However, the violence and scorching heat were restrained, like the rain falling in the spring of March. At this moment, Qian Donglu suddenly paused. He gathered all his momentum at his waist and sank into the ground, following which, with a loud bang, his body swung up. Against the cracked ground, he flashed to Lu Cheng's side at lightning speed, taking advantage of the fact that Lu Cheng had almost exhausted all his moves and was in mid-air, where it was difficult for him to exert his strength. Accompanied by the explosive wind, Qian Donglu straightened his left palm and chopped forward. The rising silvery white light made Lu Cheng's eyes sparkle. Lu Cheng couldn't care less. He turned sideways, swung his arm, clenched his fist and hammered downwards. The faint purple fireball around him whizzed out. Qian Donglu's palm vibrated mysteriously. Like a hot knife cutting butter, he silently split the faint purple fireball into two halves. The halves fell to the surroundings and then exploded. After the split, he used up all his momentum and retreated with the force of the rebound, causing Lu Cheng's fist to hit empty air. Bam! The moment he retreated, he stomped on the ground with his right foot. Like a spring that had been compressed to its limit, he fiercely slammed his body sideways. This was a variation of the second chop. The palm was the knife, the body was the knife. The small knife broke the defense, while the long knife took the life. Just by looking at these few moves, Qian Donglu was a master in the way of the knife. He wasn't much weaker than the god-slaying knife Lu Yongyuan. To him, the principles of martial arts were interconnected. A knife sage was a knife sage, a sword sage was a sword sage, and a fist sage was a fist sage. He was the warrior sage of the present age. Chapter 668. Flames ignited behind him and tore through the air. Like a rocket, Lu Qing closed the distance between him and Qian Donglu and punched his face. He imitated the Nile general Satha, using the fire sect techniques as its foundation. He called it jet counterattack. The shadow on his face grew heavier, and the fist in his eyes grew bigger. Qian Donglu suddenly smiled and took a deep breath. His body swelled again, his muscles propping up his tattered clothes. Through the cracks, his pulsating veins, bronze skin, and lightning patterns outlined by a silver pen could be seen. Qian Donglu clenched his left hand into a fist, sending out bolts of purple electricity from his joints and muscles. This stimulated his body like a simplified explosive secret art, but it also contained a dangerous aura. Bam! He swung his shoulders and punched. Attack against attack. Boom! The exaggerated contortions of his muscles and bones were drowned out by the tumbling airwaves and the exaggerated sound of the collision. Purple electric sparks flew everywhere. Against such a backdrop, Lu Cheng's body swayed and he took 2 steps back. The Thunder Sect's martial arts were known for their ferocity. After a long battle, the heavily injured Qian Donglu was still slightly stronger than Lu Cheng. Bam! As Lu Cheng retreated, Qian Donglu immediately rushed forward. His left leg stepped out, and his right leg tensed to deliver a low kick, no higher than the knee joint. Lu Cheng's right fist was still numb from the electric shock. His opponent's movements were swift and fluid, giving him no chance to use force concentration to neutralize the effects. Lifting his hip, spreading his leg, and tensing his knee, he could only match a low kick with a low kick. Bam! As the 2 feet collided, both shoes shattered into flying butterflies, some burning with purple flames, some entwined with electric sparks. Lu Cheng swung his left leg back and took a large step back, widening the distance between them. As Qian Donglu closed in again, he outlined a large ancient word in his mind. He didn't use any hand seals, but used it in a simplified manner. Formation. A deep, authoritative voice reverberated. The surrounding airflow immediately constricted and solidified, like invisible shackles trying to bind his opponent. At this moment, purple electricity flashed between Qian Donglu's eyebrows. The terrifying aura of a heavenly tribulation filled the air again, suppressing all unnatural things. The illusory lightning swept across, and the mysterious air disappeared in an instant. Before the air cage could take shape, it had already vanished. Lu Cheng was well aware of the uniqueness of the Thunder Sect. He didn't expect the simplified formation formula to have any effect, but he seized this brief moment to recover his qi and blood and paralysis. His Dan force gushed out. Instead of retreating, he moved forward. He swung his right arm, which had returned to normal, and hammered his opponent vigorously. A thin layer of purple flame rose and covered the surface of his fist, giving it a heavy feeling. At the same time, he hid his strength in his left shoulder, and was about to launch a series of slashes. He was going to inject needles crazily into the martial saint, who only had one arm to use. He was going to maximize his advantage. Facing Lu Cheng's attack, Qian Donglu suddenly lowered his body. Like an agile monkey, he changed his position slightly and positioned himself in front of Lu Cheng's right. This made it difficult for Lu Cheng's follow-up left punch to land. Crack! Turning his left palm into a knife, Qian Donglu raised it and chopped at Lu Cheng's right wrist. Purple flames flowed from the cut, and electric sparks shot out. Without waiting for Lu Cheng to turn and punch with his left fist, Qian Donglu used the momentum of the downward rebound to bend his left arm. With a bam, he hit his opponent's chest with his elbow. Lu Cheng's prepared left arm swung, and turned his fist into a palm. He blocked horizontally and barely caught the martial saint's elbow joint. Even so, the back of his palm was pressed against his chest, making him feel suffocated. Lu Cheng couldn't care less about this. His hair stood on end. Without thinking, he circulated his qi and blood to stimulate his body, and executed the simplified fighting formula. His muscles swelled. With a shake of his left palm, he shook Qian Donglu out. At this moment his opponent had smoothly retracted his arm. He changed from a bump to a lean, using a long saber after a small knife. Boom! Qian Donglu, who had been thrown out, leaned against the air. His invisible force produced a sound akin to a sonic boom. Lu Cheng couldn't help but feel lucky. If he didn't have the ability to detect danger and reacted half a beat slower, he would have been hit head-on, and followed in Dragon King's footsteps. Qian Donglu had done all this with only his left arm. Through his grasp of timing, judgment of the situation, and observation of his own body, he had turned something rotten into something magical. Although he was a martial artist who was good at improvising in battle, he was still too green and inexperienced compared to the martial saint. This was a true grandmaster. Lu Cheng's thoughts ran smoothly in his ice heart, not affecting his judgment. Using the strong wind created by Qian Donglu's head-on collision, he shifted his center of gravity, twisted his waist, and circled around his opponent. He swung his arms wide and punched continuously. Compared to before, he focused on the mesmerizing snow steps. Regardless of whether his fist collided with his opponent, He immediately changed directions after a punch. Bam, bam, bam. Lu Cheng wasn't stingy with his flame force. Purple flames covered the surface of his fist and sputtered out continuously. This raised the temperature of the surroundings once again, causing both parties to breathe in scorching air. This was the application of Fata Morgana, suffocating hell. Just as dark clouds gathered overhead and the magnetic field on the ground intensified, Lu Cheng took the initiative to change his move. He hit the martial saint with a scorching punch and ignited the scorching air. In an instant, he and Qian Donglu were completely immersed in a sea of flames. Flames billowed around them, making it look like hell. In such an environment, Lu Cheng's skin wasn't charred, and his clothes only started to curl. The flames surrounded him but didn't hurt him, making him look like the Emperor of Fire. In terms of fire control, he was confident that he could completely suppress the martial saint. In such a battle, the difference was obvious. Qian Donglu naturally wouldn't sit still and wait for death in the sea of flames. Before his hair and clothes caught fire, he struck his left palm diagonally, a purple seal flashing in his eyes. Rumble, rumble, rumble. Bolts of lightning fell from the dark clouds in the sky. The lightning seemed to have transformed into a forest, covering the sea of flames. Expressionlessly, Lu Cheng condensed a layer of pure ice and withstood a lightning strike. He stepped closer to the martial saint and punched out. Qian Donglu shook his left arm, reached out, and grabbed. Then he broke the tendons and dislocated the bones. At this moment, the sea of flames was extinguished, and the dark clouds dispersed. Poof! Just as Qian Donglu's palm grabbed Lu Cheng's fist, he suddenly felt a bone-piercing cold. A thick and translucent layer of ice started from his fingers and spread rapidly to his body. Lament of the Ice Queen. After keeping the fire force away from his body, Lu Cheng didn't need to use force concentration to balance the Lament of the Ice Queen. This was the result of his experience after the master battle, and the changes he had prepared for today's match. Seeing that he was about to be sealed in ice, Qian Donglu suddenly twisted his arm and leaped into the air, spinning at high speed. The drill bit was his 5 fingers that were frozen in the ice. Silver snakes of lightning spurted out, forming an illusory electric drill. In a breath, it split the thick ice wall. However, Lu Cheng didn't seem to care. He clenched his other hand into a fist and threw a crimson fireball at Qian Donglu, who was in midair. This was the real attack he had been planning for a long time. Boom! Amidst the lightning, Lu Cheng's body swayed and he took a few steps back. The surface of his right fist had turned black. Lightning arcs danced wildly, causing intense pain and numbness. However, he wasn't dejected. On the contrary, he was delighted. This was because Qian Donglu had been blasted away. His face was covered in dust, and his injuries were even more severe. His body expanded, and his powerful qi and blood seemed capable of harming others. He swung his arm and punched at the warrior sage. Qian Donglu's eyes glowed. His entire body seemed to turn illusory, turning into streaks of lightning. Silver, deep purple, and green exploded. Lu Cheng didn't make any adjustments. He just punched with his eyes wide open. Boom! As if there was an explosion, Qian Donglu sank knee-deep into the ground. Traces of blood could be seen at the corners of his eyes and mouth, and his eyes were filled with confusion. Lu Cheng's entire body was convulsing. Electricity danced on the surface of his body, paralyzing all his muscles. However, his willpower was high. He forced himself to complete a Dan equilibrium concentration, alleviating much of the effects. Then he punched at Qian Donglu's face. Just as his opponent followed the Dan equilibrium concentration and raised his arm to block, Lu Cheng forcibly twisted his waist and shifted his position. In a flash, he was behind the warrior sage. His hands swiped forward, pressing on both sides of the warrior sage's temples. Qian Donglu was an arrow at the end of its flight. He could only focus on his left, but not his right. He couldn't make a complete response in time. Phew! The wind slowed. Lu Cheng's palm stopped. The referee raised his right arm and announced, "Round 2, Lu Cheng wins. P.S. Tomorrow is the day to go to the hospital for acupuncture. You only update after 7 p.m., so this doesn't count as not updating. Chapter 669. Second round, Lu Qing wins. As the referee's voice entered his ears, Qian Donglu's slightly arched figure was reflected in his pupils. Lu Qing was momentarily dazed, as though he had just experienced a vivid dream. I won? I really won? I really beat the warrior sage, whose name had shaken the world for almost a decade. Even though he had fought a tough battle and was heavily injured, he was still a matchless mighty one who no one could compete with except for the Dragon King. He was the ultimate big boss of Lu Cheng's childhood fantasies. His white clothes were stained gray by the dust, torn and tattered everywhere, mixed with charred and bloodstains. Beads of sweat rolled down his forehead at a speed visible to the naked eye. His right arm hung limply, and his left hand was barely raised halfway, trembling slightly. Purple electricity danced on the back of his head. His black hair was in a mess, as though it had been bitten by a dog. These were the warrior sage, Qian Donglu, that Lu Qing was looking at. From a different perspective than the battle videos and interviews, he was standing in the position of the victor. He was also human. He could be hurt and embarrassed, and he could not react in time. Inexplicable emotions welled up in Lu Cheng's heart. Suddenly, there was a natural change in him. When he first stepped into the circle of physical invulnerability, and came into contact with title matches and top-tier professional competitions, he was filled with reverence, yearning, and worship. This stemmed from his initial yearning and years of nurturing. But now, after Qian Donglu had lost to him, this feeling faded away and a dream settled down. The halo of those familiar names weakened, revealing the reality that they should have represented. A friend who made friends through martial arts, an enemy who competed for first place, a living person, and an opponent who could be defeated. Phew, this is considered the mentality of a mighty one, right? Lu Qing mocked himself inwardly and retracted his hands. Seeing Qian Donglu turn around, he cupped his fists and bowed. Thank you. As he said this, he suddenly felt an indescribable joy. A joy he wanted to share with his wife, teachers, and friends. I can finally say this to the warrior sage. This feeling was so wonderful that Lu Qing couldn't wait to do it a few more times. It made him envision the scene of facing the complete warrior sage in the future, and made him yearn for his next opponent even more. No matter who he is, I will challenge him as an enemy. Even if I lose, I will not be discouraged. I will be crazy for victory. Qian Donglu sized him up and saluted him with one hand. His lips curled into a mechanical smile as he walked towards the Shangqing sect's seating area. Who is my opponent? Second round, Lu Qing wins. Kai Zongming had forgotten to complain about the boring commentary. He stared blankly at Lu Cheng's palms resting on Qian Donglu's temples. It was as though he was trying to break down the scene into countless small sections, find traces of Photoshop, or memorize it in his mind. When Lu Qing made the great leap and achieved physical invulnerability, Kai Zongming had a similar feeling. However, it was never as intense as now. Was the mighty one who was pressing his palms against the warrior sage's vital points really the same old-fashioned, cowardly, and unconfident friend of his? If anyone had dared to make such a prediction, he would have played a good joke on them. Even if he watched a person slowly transform and succeed, when he reached a level he didn't even dare to dream of in the past, would it still feel surreal and like a dream? Kai Zongming took a deep breath and sent a bullet comment. My bro. The moment he said this, he received an intense response. The screen almost exploded with messages. My best friend. My big brother. My husband. My child's father. My father. Grandpa. Damn it, what kind of people are they? They're even more shameless than me. Kai Zongming couldn't help but laugh. The second round, Lu Qing wins. Upon hearing this, Eternal Nightfall, Yan Xiaoling, immediately jumped up and took a perfect screenshot. She then posted it on the forum. Haha, I've succeeded in my first challenge against the warrior sage. What's the big deal? As long as you're in the top professional competitions, there will be a similar situation sooner or later. Unparalleled Dragon King pretended to be dismissive of Yan Xiaoling's excitement. Yan Xiaoling didn't mind at all. Haha, the beginning is always the hardest. After this, there will be a next time. Now it's the warrior sage with 30% HP. In the future it will be 50%, 70%, 90% warrior sage, complete body warrior sage, explosive body warrior sage. Just thinking about it makes me excited. Are you playing a game? How can you say something like that? Brahmin was shocked. Shivering emoji. Haha, I'm just applying what I've learned. When I think of the scene that will happen, wah, I can't help but cry. Yan Xiaoling changed her mind. Nyechichi. They immediately heaved a sigh of relief and said one after another. It's still stupid Ling. It's still Chao Zi with a touching IQ. Alright, let's stop chatting. The third round is about to begin. Unparalleled Dragon King reminded them. Damn, I almost forgot. Yan Xiaoling cursed. Who's the opponent? Brahmin was confused. Probably. Unparalleled Dragon King glanced at the participant list. Taoist Wu Guang. Why do I feel like there's a typo? At this moment, Lu Cheng had already seen his next opponent. His silver hair and black hair were split in half. He had a gentle temperament, neither tall nor short, neither thin nor fat. His looks were average and lacked any distinguishing features. Wu. Taoist Wu Guang. Lu Cheng finally recalled this name from the depths of his memory. He remembered who his opponent was. The sect leader of Shangqing sect, the mighty one with the least sense of presence. Before coming to Sky Thunder Mountain, he had watched many of his competition videos and summarized many useful things. He had made preparations specifically for this. How could he have almost forgotten about him? That's right. What did I figure out? Why do I feel like he's ordinary and doesn't have any strong points? While Lu Cheng was racking his brains to recall, Taoist Wu Guang was already standing in front of him with a long sword shining with a metallic luster. They were about 30 meters apart, surrounded by toppled high-voltage electric poles. Broken wires crisscrossed the ground and intersected with the remaining ones in the air. Chapter 670. Seeing Taoist Wu Guang standing opposite him, and the referee at the edge of the field raising his right hand, Lu Cheng was still trying to recall the details of his enemy. He felt like he had forgotten something important. The referee looked around and waved his arm down. Gathering the qi in his dantian, he announced, "Begin!" Clang. Taoist Wu Guang's metal longsword suddenly let out a dragon's roar, and left his hand. Electricity swirled around it. Sword manipulation technique. Seeing this scene, Lu Cheng suddenly woke up and remembered what he had forgotten. Taoist Wu Guang was using a sword, but it wasn't a normal sword. It was more like flying swords in novels. Whoosh. The longsword circled by silver electricity flew out. Accelerated by the magnetic field, it moved faster and faster, more and more powerful. It was like a leaping dragon, or an electromagnetic cannon. Lu Cheng activated his skill and quickly condensed a crimson fireball. He aimed it at the silver-white lightning and blasted it. Just as the two were about to collide, Taoist Wu Guang flicked his finger, and the electromagnetic flying sword casually tilted upward, dodging the fiery cannonball. During this process, the sword was full of intelligence. It didn't disobey Taoist Wu Guang's command because of the lack of direct contact. On the contrary, it was as if there was an invisible arm between them, wielding the longsword with ease. This was a profound application of electromagnetic force, and it was also thanks to the environment of the Shangqing sect. If it were any other place, Taoist Wu Guang would have warmed up before doing so. How could he master sword manipulation if he couldn't wield the sword with ease? Lu Cheng's scalp tingled at the sight of the silver-white leaping up and the crimson landing. Taking advantage of the change in trajectory, he calmly gathered a ball of golden flames with enemy heart-freezing move, and directed it to fly diagonally towards the tip of the sword. Just then, the silver-white sword circled nimbly on the spot, dodging the golden flames. However, as the golden flames flew past, there was a slight explosion inside. Under the guidance of Lu Cheng's powerful mind power, the golden flames changed direction and struck the longsword again. The golden color of the 9 rotations of 5 flames originated from the techniques of fire force and golden godly fire. It could be manipulated after being fired. Once a martial artist mastered it, He could make it change direction twice or even 3 times. Although Lu Cheng wasn't a physical invulnerability expert who practiced fire force, and his golden godly fire was just a beginner, his path of blending martial arts and cultivation gave him a higher mental strength than others of the same class. Moreover, he also had the ability to balance ice and fire, which gave him a better control over external forces. Coupled with the uniqueness of the golden flame, he naturally mastered the technique of 2-directional changes in advance. The golden fireball trailed behind it as it collided with the silver longsword. Suddenly, Taoist Wuguang jabbed forward with his finger, and the sword's radiance accelerated, deftly evading the enemy's attack and causing the fireball to suffer a nose full of dust. Lightning leaped, moving faster and faster in the magnetic field. Coupled with the fact that the distance between them had shortened, it had almost reached Lu Cheng as soon as it got rid of the golden fireball. There was no time to dodge. Lu Cheng raised his arms, straightened his palms, and brought them together, sandwiching the tip of the sword in the middle. Layers of translucent ice appeared in his palms, temporarily blocking the attack of paralysis, with its poor electrical conductivity. But at that moment, Lu Cheng suddenly had a premonition of danger. He felt like he had forgotten or overlooked something. 30 meters away, Taoist Wuguang calmly gave up control of the flying sword. He calmly brought his palms together and clapped them together. Boom! A thunderclap exploded in the air, seemingly reverberating in Lu Cheng's heart. He shuddered, his ears ringing, and his vision blurred. He felt like a 1,000-year-old pagoda tree prostrating before the heavenly tribulation. Fortunately, his ice heart had been formed long ago. There were only cracks but no ripples. He quickly calmed down and instinctively dove to the side. Bam! Taoist Wuguang separated his palms and pulled out a dark purple lightning as thin as a cicada's wing. As soon as this blade-shaped purple lightning appeared, it immediately crossed the distance of dozens of meters and slashed at Lu Cheng's back, leaving a bone-deep, charred and bloodless wound that extended from the bottom of his shoulder all the way to the bottom of his butterfly muscles. If Lu Cheng hadn't noticed it and dodged in time, it would have hit him directly in the front, injuring his lungs or heart and severely injuring him. At that moment, Lu Cheng realized what he had overlooked. He had overlooked the fact that Taoist Wuguang had other moves besides sword manipulation. This should have been obvious from the Thunder Sect's physical invulnerability chapters, but he had overlooked it. How strange! In this way, he had both the electromagnetic sword and the support of various secret arts. If he had focused on dealing with the flying sword first, it would have been easy for killer moves like thunder from a clear sky, cloudless thunderblade, to take advantage of the opening. If he had engaged in close combat, he would have to divert his attention to guard against sneak attacks from the flying sword. He wouldn't be able to use his full strength, and he would definitely be no match for Taoist Wuguang. Lu Cheng didn't dare to use force concentration to neutralize the effects of the electric shock on his back. Instead, he turned his waist and used his footwork, stirring up a gust of wind mixed with snowflakes. He narrowly avoided the horizontal slash of the electromagnetic sword that had escaped his control. Then, as the wind howled and snow fell, Lu Cheng seemed to have turned into a roly-poly toy. He swayed and changed directions in the snowy environment, competing with the flying sword that needed to be controlled. Soon, he gained the upper hand and started closing in on Taoist Wuguang. But the closer he got, the smoother the sword's movements became. Lu Cheng gradually felt like Taoist Wuguang was hacking and stabbing with his sword. It wasn't as easy for him as before. Lu Cheng took a step forward. The silvery white flying sword swung down. Amidst the flickering light, it almost cut his back. Just then he turned around abruptly, his hands forming a seal. Ancient words appeared in his mind. Lu Cheng bellowed, "Formation!" The airflow contracted and solidified layer by layer, transforming into invisible shackles that trapped the electromagnetic longsword in a cage. From the moment he stirred up the snowstorm, Lu Cheng's plan was to attack Taoist Wuguang in the open, and the longsword in the dark. He would first destroy his opponent's best weapon, then engage in close combat with all his might. He wouldn't be able to hold on for long if he just wanted to wear down his opponent. The longsword trembled in place, trying to break free. Behind Lu Cheng, two faint purple and crimson fireballs formed. They converged as he clenched his fist and smashed downwards. At this moment, he only had eyes for the electromagnetic flying sword. He felt like he had forgotten something. Not far away, Taoist Wuguang sighed helplessly. With a flip of his palm, a flash of green appeared. Lu Cheng's hair stood on end. Without hesitation, he gave up his attack on the longsword and threw himself to the side as he detonated the crimson fireballs. Bam! A bolt of green lightning struck the spot where he had been standing, leaving a deep crater and smoking charred ground. The scene was clearly reflected in the ice heart. Lu Cheng was startled and came to his senses. Damn, I actually forgot about my opponent, Wuguang. All I could think about was the flying sword. When my attention was drawn by the electromagnetic sword, I would unknowingly forget about my real enemy, his methods, and even his existence. This is definitely not normal. Recalling Wuguang's lack of presence and the fact that he was always overlooked, Lu Cheng had a vague idea. Perhaps this was his innate ability? The higher the realm, the more exaggerated it is. When not in battle, he could subconsciously make his opponent ignore or forget about him, treating it as unimportant information. In battle, his opponent was fully focused and had locked onto him, so the effect wasn't as good. That was why he practiced the sword manipulation technique. By separating himself from the sword, he could draw attention away from his opponent and reduce his own presence. Empress Luo and the rest didn't warn him about this, probably because they had neglected it. After this match, he might not care too much about it and treat it as an ordinary matter. In the blink of an eye, he would forget about it. No, I have to write it down in my notebook. His mind raced. He didn't slow down his footwork, carefully avoiding areas with high-voltage wires and strong magnetic fields. He created a feathery snowstorm on the mountaintop, concealing his tracks to a certain extent so that he could treat the wound on his back and the effects of the paralysis. He was also looking for a way to deal with Taoist Wuguang's strange talent. However, the electromagnetic longsword seemed to have locked onto him or was attracted by him. It kept coming at him without getting lost, forcing him to keep moving so that he wouldn't be distracted again. As he moved, Lu Cheng used the ice heart to clearly reflect his surroundings. He observed Taoist Wuguang from the corner of his eye, not giving him the chance to be distracted. After circling around, his eyes suddenly landed on a rock beside his opponent. It was a bare rock that had been split in half and was covered in scorch marks. A rock. Lu Cheng had a flash of inspiration. He had a preliminary idea. Taoist Wuguang's supernatural ability affects him, but not the environment. I may ignore him, but I won't forget my surroundings. Wouldn't it be better to add a source of information, form a network structure, and give him a reference and a benchmark? After making up his mind, Lu Cheng took advantage of the turn and formed faint purple, crimson, light blue, gold, and white fireballs around him. He had them circle around him in a regular pattern like satellites. After taking one last look at Taoist Wuguang's position, and confirming that there wasn't much change, Lu Cheng suddenly turned around, clenched his fist, and punched at the electromagnetic flying sword that was chasing after him. He clenched his fist and met the tip of the silvery white sword head-on. At the same time, the 5 colored fireballs around him flew out and enveloped the 2 halves of the charred rock, its front, back, sides, and Taoist Wuguang. Seeing this, Taoist Wuguang lowered his waist and leaped into the air, shooting into the distance like a bolt of lightning. Behind him, explosions rocked the air, sending clouds of dust into the air. Purple and gold flashed in a myriad of colors. As Taoist Wuguang dodged, the electromagnetic flying sword seemed to have lost most of its spirituality and became rather dull. It was hit by Lu Cheng's punch, bending its body and whimpering as it flew backward. P.S. I forgot to set a time for today's chapter. Just treat it as an early release. Chapter 671. After sending the electromagnetic longsword flying with a punch, Lu Cheng used his cosmic universe sect technique to quickly form new crimson, faint purple, light blue, gold, and dazzling white. Instead of firing them all at once, he had them follow Taoist Wuguang's footsteps in a chain of bombardments. During this process, at least 3 fireballs circled and circled around him, as though they were man-made satellites or divine immortals. Boom, boom, boom. Lu Cheng was like a cannon, firing off a barrage of purple, crimson and golden missiles, forcing Taoist Wuguang to unfold his body and swim around like a wild goose to avoid the attacks. The silvery white flying sword regained some of its spirituality and once again circled Lu Cheng, slashing, slicing, stabbing, swiping and twisting. It was trying to break through Lu Cheng's defense while he was distracted with Taoist Wuguang, disrupt his 5 flames, and even kill him. However, Lu Cheng's gaze was fixed on the distance, but his mind was on the inside. While paying attention to the target objects around Taoist Wuguang, he also reflected his surroundings. Wherever the electromagnetic longsword wanted to destroy the fireballs, he would fire them first. As for the electromagnetic sword beam's attack on him, he didn't care at all. It was purely based on his premonition of danger. At the critical moment, he instinctively spread out his arms so that his fist, which was wearing an ice crystal glove, hit the sword and sent it flying. The battle went on for a while. Neither Lu Cheng nor Taoist Wuguang could find a quick way out of the stalemate. They could only wait for another opportunity to present itself. To Lu Cheng this wasn't a bad thing, but a good thing. He hadn't forgotten that his goal was to wear out his opponent as much as possible. This situation was perfect. Taoist Wuguang's movements and turns were getting faster and faster. His footsteps were accompanied by howling wind and thunder, shrouding the mountaintop in a low hum. Layers of clouds accumulated and hung low in the sky, as dark as lead, oppressing the hearts of the people. All of this was the precursor to an extreme thunderstorm. Streaks of silver and pure green leaped between the dark clouds, slowly accumulating power, piling up a destructive aura. Bam! Taoist Wuguang took a step forward, the flames behind him shooting up into the sky. Black clouds expanded and filled the air with black smoke. He was like the kind of person who never looked back to see an explosion. Without stopping his footsteps, he pressed his palm, causing the magnetic force to surge and the dancing electric snakes to cut through the darkness and slash at the enemy. Lu Cheng felt it in his heart. He immediately shook his arm and punched the tip of the sword. The surface of the sword was clear and pure, surrounded by cold air. Bang! The fist blasted through the air and hit the flying sword. At this moment, the sky suddenly lit up. A thick silver-white lightning illuminated the surroundings and struck down with a loud bang. It bared its fangs and brandished its claws, looking extremely ferocious. It seemed to be attracted by something and pointed directly at the tip of the magneto-optical flying sword. The speed of the real lightning was ridiculous. As soon as it appeared, it was faster than Lu Cheng's reaction after he had sensed the danger. It hit the target accurately, causing it to emit an extremely dazzling light. With a crack, it shattered the enemy's ice crystal gloves. Sword-guided heavenly thunder. Rumble. It wasn't until then that the roar of thunder erupted, reverberating around the mountaintop and silencing the surroundings. Zzz. The remaining electric current from the longsword poured into his fist, quickly charring his skin and causing his left arm to tremble violently. Soon, the trembling spread to his entire body. He wanted to break free, but it was as if he was stuck there. After the initial and most violent paralysis, Lu Cheng forced himself to hold on. He gathered his remaining strength, gathered his qi and blood, concentrated his spirit, and equaled his dantian. With a whoosh, he pulled back his left arm, severing the connection. However, Taoist Wuguang had already closed in on him at lightning speed. His right hand gripped the hilt of his sword firmly. He lifted it up and struck again. Another bolt of lightning struck. After the heavenly thunder, he seemed to have temporarily lost the ability to control his sword from a distance. Bam! Lu Cheng's dantian qi exploded, his muscles bulging. His fist shot up to meet the attack. First, it spurted out the invading silver-white lightning, then formed a thick layer of ice. Rumble! 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 Each strike of Taoist Wuguang's was faster than the one before. With each strike he absorbed the heavenly thunder. His sword moves were simple and unadorned, but there was an indescribable mystery to them. Just like the lightning in nature, they seem to be common, but they contain the most basic and mysterious principles. The 9 tribulations fell one after another. There seemed to be no gap between the sword radiance and the lightning. Although Lu Cheng tried his best to defend himself, even using the momentum to raise the surrounding temperature and create a suffocating hell. He couldn't break free. Gradually, he began to falter. Bam! The sword radiance expanded, turning into a bolt of lightning without branches. It struck Lu Cheng's raised arms, shattering the ice wall. Smoke rose from his body twitched, and his legs went numb. He flew backward involuntarily. At this critical juncture, Lu Cheng couldn't care less. He threw the remaining 3 fireballs hovering around him forward. Purple, red, and gold flashed in an instant. Rumble. The huge flames and exaggerated smoke forced Taoist Wu Guang to move and defend himself with his sword. His 2 sleeves were missing, revealing thick arms that didn't match his age and appearance. They were a bloody mess. Other parts of his body were cracked and charred, and some even showed bones. He was no longer ordinary, and was in a sorry state. As his aura plummeted, he raised a finger, dispersing the remaining dark clouds in the sky. Bolts of lightning wrapped around his home ground and struck down like a plow. Boom! Boom! In the silvery forest of lightning, Lu Cheng endured his injuries and fought back. Sometimes he dodged, sometimes he moved with clever footwork, and sometimes he swung his fists to parry the lightning serpents. Just as he was about to survive this wave of attacks, he suddenly felt a sense of danger. Without thinking, he took a step back and swung his forearm to the side. Bam! His muscles, which were condensed into ice walls, smashed into a silvery white sword blade, causing it to bend and fly backwards. Taoist Wu Guang's electromagnetic longsword had taken to the air again. He had almost succeeded in his sneak attack. With the successful attack and the lightning dissipating, Lu Cheng didn't feel happy. Instead, he felt an even stronger sense of danger. Bam! He detonated the remaining Emperor Yen in his body and shifted to the side. At that moment, Taoist Wu Guang's figure appeared behind him. No one noticed him. Lu Cheng had almost forgotten about his opponent again. Seeing him dodge in time, Taoist Wu Guang's face was impassive, neither happy nor angry. He flipped his palm and pointed it at the sky. The purple seal in his eyes shone brightly, penetrating from top to bottom. Lu Cheng had just finished his move when his eyes flashed. A bolt of purple lightning formed a dozen meters above his head and struck down mightily. After dodging, he only had time to tilt his head despite his heightened sense of danger. The bolt landed squarely on his shoulder. Bam! Enveloped by the penetrating light, every inch of his bones became distinct. He froze, trembling and paralyzed. The first move of the Thunder Sect, punishment on behalf of heaven. Whoosh! Taoist Wu Guang moved his fingers, and the electromagnetic longsword accelerated again. It shot out like a cannonball and hovered between Lu Cheng's eyebrows. Lu Cheng had just recovered when he saw this. He sighed dejectedly and stood still. The referee raised his right hand and announced loudly, "Round 3, Taoist Wu Guang wins." Chapter 672. Round 3, Taoist Wu Guang wins. Lu Cheng didn't feel that anything was amiss when he heard the announcement. Instead, he focused more on assessing his own emotions. Every defeat made him feel dejected, and this match was no exception. Although he had injured his opponent and drained him of his energy, achieving his initial goal, Lu Cheng still felt that he could have done better and lasted a little longer. He shouldn't have lost so easily. To be honest, this was the first time he had encountered an opponent like this. He used to joke that some people's presence was too weak, as if they had supernatural powers. It turned out that such a thing really existed, and Taoist Wu Guang was one of the best. All the information on him had inadvertently neglected this crucial point, making people think that he was just a weak presence. Once they encountered him, they would immediately be at a disadvantage. The slightest distraction would cause them to forget about their opponent and focus on the wrong target. If it weren't for Lu Cheng's ability to foresee danger, he would have suffered a crushing defeat in today's battle. Luckily Taoist Wu Guang didn't practice the secret arts of the Dark Sect or Death Sect. Otherwise, he would have been even more terrifying and unpredictable. Lu Cheng rejoiced and collected his thoughts. He planned to jot this down in his notebook, so that he wouldn't forget it again. Phew, thank you for your guidance, Senior. He exhaled, bowed to the sect master of the Shangqing sect, who was of the same seniority as his master, and returned to the edge of the cliff where the Longhu Club was located. Aya, how did we lose? Eternal Nightfall. Yan Shaoling slapped her thigh and posted a message on the forum. It felt like it was over before they could figure out who the opponent was. There wasn't a strong sense of regret. It was as if they had never fought this match. Similar thoughts flashed through the minds of Yan Zhika, Kai Zhongming, and the rest. They felt like they were watching a fake match. As for the Shangqing sect members, they turned their attention to their next opponent. Ghost King Ning Zitong had already stood up. Her skin was fair and smooth, and her black hair was coiled up elegantly. Coupled with her majestic beauty, she was exceptionally eye-catching. No one could tell that she was in her 40s. She wore a loose-fitting navy blue martial arts suit that hid her beautiful figure. She walked over to Lu Cheng and nodded slightly in greeting. Lu Cheng nodded in response and clenched his fist instinctively as encouragement. After brushing past Ning Zitong, he returned to the guest team seats. The Dragon King Chen Qitao looked at him calmly. He wasn't disappointed, but he wasn't happy either. He quickly turned his attention to the third match that was about to begin. Guojia, on the other hand, was deep in thought with a frown. TSK Sister Ning's claw is so cool. The secret arts of the dark sect are like works of art in her hands. Sigh, it's just that Wu Guang. Taoist Wu Guang isn't willing to cooperate and always interrupts at crucial moments, preventing us from seeing the best parts. What's wrong with that old man? He's such an eyesore. He's affecting Sister Ning's performance. If only he wasn't around. Similar thoughts flashed through many of the spectators' minds. Perhaps it was because of condemned by the masses, but Taoist Wu Guang gradually faltered. After another round of intense battle, he finally lost to his opponent. Ning Zitong, the Ghost King, wasn't unscathed. There were several tears and holes in her navy blue martial arts suit, revealing charred skin and flesh underneath. In addition, a sword mark extended from the right side of her back to her neck, leaving behind a hideous wound and fresh blood. This didn't ruin her image. Instead, it added to her wild and seductive beauty. Words like Bloody Mary popped up in Lu Cheng's mind. Round 4, Ning Zitong wins. As the referee's voice entered his ears, Lu Cheng's gaze shifted to the Shangqing sect seating area. Peng Liyun, in his white robes, stood up straight purely on the strength of his waist. His hair was still short and crisp. His eyes glowed as he focused. It was as though countless lightning bolts were striking down from the ninth heaven. Step by step, he quickly reined in his fluttering thoughts. The aura around him grew fierce, as though it was hiding extremely destructive lightning. Where there's yang, there's yin. Where there's life, there's death. The lightning produced by the interaction of yin and yang had the meaning of righteousness, birth, and awakening, but also destruction, and punishment on behalf of the heavens. At this moment, Peng Liyun was the embodiment of the latter. His surroundings grew darker and darker, reminding Lu Cheng of his ice spirit, which symbolized the boundless darkness of the universe. However, Peng Liyun was closer to death, closer to annihilation, like the end of everything. Lu Cheng frowned and muttered under his breath. This doesn't feel normal. This isn't the same as the Taoist from before. Suddenly, Lu Yan exclaimed from beside him. Forbidden Sect, Shangqing Chapter. Lu Cheng tilted his head and blurted out in surprise. He can learn it so quickly. Comprehend. Lu Yan corrected him, then shook his head slightly. The sect's legacy is still a little different from ours. If you want to comprehend it, you'll have to accumulate enough merits first. Lu Cheng asked thoughtfully. Then why didn't Taoist Wu Guang show it? He's the sect leader. Do you think he came up with that 10,000 lightning strike, cleansing the earth move by himself? It's just that he integrated it well with his own martial arts, so it's hard to tell. Lu Yan snorted. Lu Cheng was stunned for a few seconds. You still remember that move? If he hadn't mentioned it, I would have forgotten about it. Hearing this, the muscles on Lu Yan's face twitched. He looked ahead and said in an almost inaudible voice, "The battle I lost the most was the first time I met Wu Guang. How can I not remember? I remember it very well. I remember it all." There's no need to emphasize it so many times. Lu Qing glanced at Lu Yin curiously and muttered to himself. Then he gathered his thoughts and cast them away. He turned his attention to the last match, the one that would determine the final victor. The referee took a step back. After Peng Leyun and Ning Zitong were in position, he raised his right arm, exhaled, and announced, "Begin." P.S. Here's a book by a friend, Ferryman of the Dead. It's about the supernatural. You're tuning in to the Echoes of the Heart YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.